I know, Santa's not the only one with a long list, right? So in this video, I'm going to have 12 full tutorials so you have something to make for everyone in the family. Let me tell you what I have in store for you. How about a new bib or a hooded towel for baby? For kids, a Quillow, a 24 crayon roll-up or bean bags. For teens, hair scrunchie or a zipper bag with a cute little holder for your wrist. For mom, a button-up scarf because it's getting cold outside, or a garden apron looking forward to spring. Had a harder time coming up with something for dad, so we're going to throw the reversible wine bag in this mix, and you can put anything you want in there, from a wrench to wine to a bottle of spirits, whatever you want. Just use it as a gift bag. And then for the dogs, two kinds of bandanas, either an over-the-collar bandana or my new favorite, the Scrunchie bandana. Check the video description. I've written down each project and the time that it starts so that you don't have to wander through the entire video all at once. Happy sewing and happy holidays. It really is the little things that bring me joy, like when my supplies all match. I mean, look at this. My pinking shears match my little birds. Love it. Let's talk about what we need to make these bibs. I'm going to be using snaps. You can use Velcro, you can do sew-on snaps, but I'm going to use these cam snaps. If you want to use plastic snaps, you need to get the extra long so that it will go through and won't rip apart if you use the terry towel, which I highly recommend you do. Then you need matching thread, this to poke the hole for the snaps, pins, pinking shears. You're going to need a piece of fabric for the front. And then I always use a terry towel for the back. Moms love it. It's just super absorbent. You kind of flip up the bib and you can wipe off whatever, it absorbs it. This is half of a towel. I had used the other half on another project. It is basically one of these that I get at Walmart. I think it comes like in a set of 6. And even with this part, you can cut it off and you can do the biggest bib and have a little bit extra for another project. So you can run to Walmart or you can look at the linked products and find them. So we're going to use this half and this piece of fabric. We're going to be doing the second of the 4 sizes. So we're going to do a 3 to 6 month bib. Now you can download this free template. I also have the pattern in my Etsy shop that includes SVG files if you like to cut fabric with a Cricut or other cutting machine or a laser cutter. I don't have a laser cutter, very tempted, but I think you might even be able to do like layers of fabric and cut them all at the same time with a laser cutter, which would be amazing if you were sewing and selling. I will also put a link in the video description to some legal requirements in the US if you want to sew and sell for babies, which is what bibs are for. So anyway, I wanted to show you really quickly the template. I have a standalone for the newborn size. It was the only one that fit on one page. And then for the others, we're going to have to cut and then tape them together, and it has all 4 sizes. It's a little harder to see the lines if you print it in black and white. So it's going to be quicker and easier if you print it in color. So you can see the newborn is the blue, pink, green, and purple. So the first thing to do is to make the template. These are my paper scissors, not my fabric scissors. Also from Fiskars, I get this easy action that they have anytime I can. Love it. So easy on your hands and your thumbs. Whenever I'm doing a template that you tape together, I cut one of them right on that line, and then I leave the other one long. Maybe not that long. I might cut it a little bit shorter, but I don't cut right up to that line, because it's easier to tape together if you have a little bit of overlap. So see, now I can overlap that, match those lines, match all these little lines, and make sure I have this in the right spot. And you're matching that A to B. I'm just going to tape that together. And we're doing the pink size, so I just need to tape to that pink line. Now also make sure when you print out your template that you print it at actual size and not to fit. Many printers defer to fit. So you want to make sure you double check that this box is 1 inch by 1 inch. If it's smaller, then your bib is going to be a little bit small. All right, so we're good to go there. Now I'm going to cut on the pink line to make my 3 to 6 month template. I'm going to take my fabric that's going to be the front. Now, if you are using directional fabric, make sure that the direction is going from the bottom to the top and you're not cutting it this way or all of your birds would be sideways. Fold this in half, right sides together. I guess it really doesn't matter because it's a mirror image. You could fold it either direction. I'm going to finger press that, and then I'm going to pin on my template, making sure this is on that fold nicely. Actually, just to save a little bit of time, I'm going to use clips on the fold. Now, I try not to hold things in the air when I cut them. You're going to get a more accurate cut if you keep it down on the table, but I keep lifting it. Now, because that's not the most fun part of sewing, I only cut the fabric on the front. And I do this whenever possible, and especially when I'm working with curves, because why cut out the towel to this shape and then have to clip all the curves anyway? So what I do is I put it right side down and I pin it, and we're going to sew all the way around here, and then we are going to cut with pinking shears. That'll cut this off and it will cut all of the curves. It's a bit of a time saver. So when I am doing this, because I've got lots of different projects I like to do with towels, I always try and keep whatever I can, kind of like keeping fabric scraps. I also like to keep my little terry towel scraps. You could use that to make a little baby washcloth, all kinds of things. So I have a little stash of those. Now for turning, you want to leave space open where you have the straightest section, because that's going to be the easiest to turn and tuck under. You don't want to do it up here on a curve. You certainly don't want to do it in here. So I'm actually going to put 2 pins together so that I know to stop, because sometimes you just get on a roll and all of a sudden you're right where you started and you're grabbing your seam ripper. So doing a little visual reminder of 2 pins together is really helpful. Now, one thing I want to mention before we get to the sewing machine where it's a little harder to see, because this curve is so tight and these are especially tight, I'm going to use just a regular stitch length, probably the 2.4 that is my machine default, all the way around here. But then when I get up here, I'm going to change it to a 1.8 to a 2.0 so that I have a smaller stitch length, and that is going to allow this to turn better. The longer the stitches, the less of a curve you're going to get, even when you clip them pretty well. We'll do that. We'll do regular stitch length, small stitch length, and then we'll clip. So let's head to the sewing machine. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and make sure you go forward and back. I usually go twice because it will be a little bit of strain on this when we're turning this right side out. And now that we're getting up to the top where the curves are getting a lot tighter, I'm going to decrease my stitch length to 1.9. And if you can't quite do the curve without picking up the foot, just leave your needle down, pick up the foot and twist it a little bit to get it back on track. And now we're to the 2 pins, so I know that I need to stop and go forward and back. And I'm going to make it as straight as possible between where I started and where I stopped. Now we're going to take pinking shears and we're going to clip all the way around where it is sewn. Make sure you don't clip your stitch lines. We're not going to use the pinking shears where we have left this open to turn. For that area, I'm going to use regular fabric scissors, and I'm going to do the towel about 1/8 of an inch even further out than the fabric. I love using pinking shears for clipping curves. It's so much faster than using little scissors and doing all these little cuts, especially on something like this that is primarily curves. And unlike cutting the fabric from the template, it's fine for me to be holding this up like this because these 2 pieces are sewn together, so nothing is going to be shifting. All right, so we're back to where I started. So I'm just going to come off the edge. So it's nice and clipped. Next step is to turn it right side out. Not sure who I'm going to give this to yet. I think one of my husband's friends having a baby. Maybe if they have a girl, this would be really cute. Sure, I'll find somebody for it sometime. Who are you going to be making bibs for? You have kids, grandbabies, nieces, nephews, neighbors. Let me know in the comments. So I turn that right side out as much as I can with my fingers. And then I grab a turning tool. Look, that matches too. We have to find joy where we can, and mine is apparently in coordination today. So I'm just going to very gently use this turning tool to push out the edge of those tight curves. So now I'm going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to press that. And I'm going to press this under so that that line continues. And you can't really see where we left it open for turning. Then we're going to go back to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. That's going to close this opening and also just keep the rest of it flat so it stays where it's supposed to be when it goes in and out of the wash like baby bibs do. I'm going to start up here because that would be in behind the baby instead of having the stitching start towards the front of the bib. And because I'm not starting off of an edge and I don't want knots on the back, I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread. So foot down, put the needle down, holding this thread, put the needle up, give a little tug. I like to grab some tweezers and then put these two threads, the bobbin and the top thread, under the foot and hold them as I take 2 to 3 stitches and then go backwards, pulling it up and holding that. Make sure that it's not going to get sucked back down and turned into a big old bird's nest knot. And just like when I sewed this, I'm going to decrease my stitch length so that I can get pretty good curves here. Now, if you wanted to do a Velcro closure, you would sew the hook side on the front and the loop side, which is softer, on the back, just in case it were to hit baby's neck. I like to have the loop on the back and then that would just close like that. But I am going to use a cam snap, so let me show you really quick how easy those are to install. As you can see, these sew up so quickly and they're cute if you just pick a fabric that you like and you just make it one fabric. You can make these as detailed as you want. If you want to make it patchwork, or if you want to add like a ribbon or some kind of trim, you could add an initial, you could embroider a name, lots and lots of ways to go. You could do HTV vinyl and put a funny saying on there, but this one I think is just adorable just as is. Let me know in the comments if you would personalize this or if you would just let the fabric do the work for you. Now let's talk about these snaps. These are cam snaps and I'm going to use the hand applicator. So for these snaps, you need 2 of the button part that has the point. And then you need 1 male and 1 female part. The male part snaps into the female part and you're not allowed to giggle about that because I want to every time. So we're going to decide where we want it, and I usually just put it towards the end, and I always start on the top one, so I'll just kind of put that, oh, look at that. If you're using thicker fabric, sometimes you need to poke the hole with this. I call it a mini ice pick. Dangerous little thing, but that just pushed right through. You need to get the long ones because of the towel. I've done it with the shorter ones, but sometimes they come apart, which is a bummer. Okay, so I have pushed that through. And now I'm going to take the female part and just put it on top. See how the point, it has a hole right in the middle and the point goes through there. And what this is going to do is it's going to smash the plastic of the point so that it holds this whole thing together. Now the black part on this is curved and the white that we pushed through the front sits in there really nicely so you can feel that it is in place. Then this part goes on top and then you just squeeze. Give it a good little squeeze and then you look and you can see that plastic point is now smashed and we've already got half done. Now what I like to do is I just overlap them and then I push down a little bit and it makes a little dent in the fabric for where you want your other snap. So I'm just going to use this for this one and push the hole in from the top. For this one, we're going to have the button part coming from the back because we need the male and female part to match. So if we had both of these on top, it would snap together like that, which would be awkward for the baby. Then we're going to put that on there and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to make sure the button part sits nicely in the black, put that together, see, and squeeze. You can see that is done and snap. So now we have a baby bib, and this is the 3 to 6 month size. So click the link, you can go grab these templates for free. So there's newborn, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, and 1 to 4 years approximately. These are a great baby shower gift, new baby gift, something to make for your baby. You can make them seasonal. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you never miss a thing. I do lots of easy sewing projects, quilting for beginners, and lots of topics on how to sew and sell. Let's turn that sewing machine into a cash machine, whether you want to build a business, pay for a vacation, or just pay for 1 or 2 of your bills that you have every month. My name is Tara Reed. I'm an artist, a fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs, and I love doing videos like this. I will sign off now, and you go have a great day. Hopefully you get to sew.
In today's episode, we're going to be making something for baby, one of my favorite projects, which is a big, soft, snuggly hooded towel. And we're just going to go the simple way so we can whip these out. Makes a great baby shower gift, something great to make for your own baby, and they are just wonderful. If you go to the store, I went to Target, grab 2 bath towels, 1 hand towel, and some scraps of fabric that you like, or if you want it to be even faster, a 2 or 3 inch wide ribbon. You can make 2 of these hooded towels in no time flat. We're going to set our bath towel aside for now, and we are going to work with our hand towel. So we're going to lay this open, and we're going to measure how wide it is. So this one is 17 inches. The reason we need to know that is we're going to be preparing our fabric. So I'm using this scrap of the Crayola Colors of Kindness by Riley Blake Designs. And since our hand towel is 17 inches wide, we need a piece of fabric that is 19 inches by 4 inches. Then we're going to be pressing it and turning it into a 2 inch wide piece that will go across the hood and be super cute. So I'm going to start by cutting a 4 inch wide strip. And then 19, since this is folded in half, we need 19 divided by 2, which is going to be 9.5. And I open that up and double check my work. Okay, 19. Now I'm going to grab an iron and the ironing board. Okay, we have our 19 inch piece of fabric. I'm going to turn that right side down. And I'm going to give it a little mist because I am using an iron without steam. Are you a steamer or do you prefer to put your water right onto your fabric? Let me know in the comments. So the first thing I'm doing is I am pressing this in half, and then we're going to open it back up, and we're going to press each side into the center, and that is going to give us a beautiful 2 inch strip of this Crayola fabric with the raw edges put on the inside. I like to use regular size towels so the kids can grow into them. They can just be super big and fluffy for babies, but then they can even use them as they become toddlers. And we're going to go back to our hand towel. Now, the reason we can do 2 hooded towels from each hand towel is that these hand towels are nice and long. So what we're going to do is we are going to line up one of the sewn edges, and then you're going to cut 10 inches from that side. So you're going to have a hood that has 3 edges that are already sewn, and then the 1 raw edge, which is the one that we're going to attach to the towel. So you don't have to deal with bias tape and all the things like that with this project. We're all about just getting this done fast, cute, and ready to use. So I'm doing the same thing, just cutting that at 10 inches. And then we have just a little bit of extra. So I'm going to save this. I might sew it with some flannel to the other side and make a cute little washcloths. We'll just set that aside for now. And we will also set aside the second top. You do want to make sure you don't let a lot of fuzz stay on your cutting mat, because if it stays in those grooves, your mat won't last as long. All right, we're going to get the ironing board back up here. And you want to pin this onto the right side of your towel. So this should be the inside of the hood. See where it's folded over, and this is going to be the outside. So you'll notice we made it a little bit longer. And the reason I have it back on here is because we are going to press these ends so that they are the perfect length for this hand towel. And even each end might be a little bit different. So you just always want to do it. And you can decide where you want to put it, closer to the edge, further up. That's totally personal decision. So you'll see I just folded that over. I'm going to give that a little press. And then I'm just going to pin those ends. You want to make sure you don't pin it to your ironing board. Then we're just going to make sure it's going straight across your towel. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're just going to fold that under so that it matches the edge of our towel. Then you're just going to put a few pins to hold it in place and make sure it's going to stay straight. Then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch around all 4 sides to secure this to the hood of the towel. Now I have my fabric on there, and so now I'm going to fold this in half with the fabric side in. And we're going to match these raw edges, and you can clip or pin them together, and then we are going to sew the raw edge together. Now there's a couple ways you can do this. You can do a 1/2 inch and a 1/4 inch seam, or you can do a zigzag. We basically want to get this sewn together and also try and encase some of this edge because it is, a towel, and so it is going to kind of fray apart if we don't somehow overlock that. So I'm going to do a zigzag stitch a little more than a 1/4 inch. So let's see how this goes. I do have a walking foot on here, but it doesn't work for zigzag, I'm learning. So if you want to zigzag with 2 terry cloth, it almost is sitting still. So I'm just kind of pulling and helping the bottom feed dogs by pulling on the top. This might be one reason to do 2 straight lines, but I really do like how this is encapsulating it. So you can see up here is where it just kind of sat still. And so those stitches are really close together, but here you can't see them as well because I was helping to move that fabric through. And it did go over the edges, so it's not going to fray a lot when it's washed. So now we have our hood and we are ready to go back and pin it to the towel, and we are almost done. Now that our hood is done, we have to connect it to our towel. And we're going to fold the towel in half with the wrong sides in, so your tags are going to be in. And we basically need to find the center of one of the long ends. So not this shorter end, but the long end, because you want the short end to wrap around them like a big hug. Okay, and now we're going to take our hood, and this is where we sewed together, and we're going to put that right inside the folded towel. We're going to overlap, about a 1/2 inch. And then we're just going to pin that on. When we sew it, we're probably going to go from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fold that back and pin half. And then I'm going to flip it. And you just want to make sure it's overlapping about the same so that the hood is a nice size, and pin the rest of this together. So let me know in the comments if you're going to use this as a little side hustle or for your own kids or as a gift. Now, the hardest part of this project is sewing over that really fat fabric part where it's folded. So I don't like to cut it off. I just like to go really slow. And then I like to start before it. So you're going to start where you're just sewing onto the big towel, and then just go super, super slow over this thick part and pray that you do not break your needle or your thread. All right, we've got this. And then you can go faster once your foot is safely off of that big lump. Then you just want to keep moving everything so it's flat for the next few inches where you're going to sew, because right here is where we sewed this together. So it's not totally flat. You just need to keep manipulating it, keeping it flat in between your pins. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more hooded towel options, how to make them maybe into a cute little dog face or another animal, or if this is fine, keeping it super simple. Let me know if you want to see more tutorials like this that are a little bit different and maybe a little bit more decorative or intricate. All right, now I'm back to the fat part again, so go really slow, and we're going to sew about 1 inch past there. And then we're going to turn, and we're going to go back the other way. Back here, so go real slow again, and then we're going to go about 1/2 inch to 1 inch over, and then we're going to knot it, and it will be all done. And the reason we went twice was just to give that towel a little bit more strength and stability for long-term use. And that is it. It is done. So, so simple. Here's what the inside looks like where we sewed it together. So this side you can see where the fabric overlapped a little bit. I didn't do that as perfectly as humanly possible, but again, it's on the inside. There's outside of the hood. These are really easy to fold. You're just going to fold it in half, just like a regular towel, except this one is going to have a hood. And it's good to go, or you can put the hood on the outside so you remember that this is one of the hooded towels. Is it a quilt? Or is it a pillow? It's both. It's called a Quillow. This is an easy and very beginner-friendly quilting project that is so handy. Kids love it. It's great for a picnic blanket, an emergency blanket, or pillow that like folds up and contains itself in your car. So many ways to use this. So let me show you first how it works. I'm using the Crayon Colors of Kindness fabric from Riley Blake Designs. I chose the crayons for one side and the orange pattern for the other side. Just love it. I did put the pocket on the crayon side, but if I was to do it again, I would put this pocket on the orange side because I feel like the crayon side, if it's for kids, which crayons usually are, is usually going to be the side that they play on and lay on. So unless they really want to like stick their feet in there for some reason, it might be better to have the pocket on the other side, but it still looks great. It blends right in. So it's not a fail. I'm just telling you that because for my next one, I will do it a little bit differently. So let me show you how to fold it, and then I will show you how to make it. Okay, let's get started. So you're going to take the side that has the pocket and you're going to put it down on your floor, workspace, bed, wherever you're going to fold it up. Now, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to fold it about 1/3 of the way in, and it just folds very nicely because it'll catch at the edge of that pocket. Then you're going to take the other side and you're going to fold that in as well. So now we have it folded in thirds, and you can teach kids to do this. I made one of these for my son when he was little, and he loved it, and he was so proud that he could put it all together by himself. Now, the pocket is down here, so we're going to start at the other end, and we're going to fold and fold until we're right up against the tip of that pocket. And then we're going to fold it one more time. So now we have the pocket on this side, the quilt's all folded on this side. Now we're just going to turn it inside out. And this is why it's super important to reinforce these corners, especially if you're going to let kids do this themselves, because those corners are going to have some wear and tear. But I show you how to do that in the video, don't you worry. And the first time you do it, you're going to be like, Tara, I don't think this works. But I promise you it does, and you'll get better at it. So you start to push it in, and then what I like to do is just kind of pull that pocket out, just like you're flipping any kind of sewing project. Get my hand in there and push out those corners so that that space is really open and we're not trying to open it as we shove the folded up quilt in there. Okay, so my quilt's about here right now, pillow's there, and then you're just going to get the rest of the quilt put in there, and you're just going to arrange it so that it is nice and flat. And now you have a pillow. It's all just going to be straight quilting. You'll need some threads if you want to do your threads to match. And I'm going to show you how and when to change all that as we get into the project. So let's get started. Definitely want to pre-wash your fabric because you're going to be putting them in and out of the wash. So that's really important. Here's what we're going to need to make the Quillow. I have cut 2 pieces of fabric. I got 1.5 yards of the orange and 2 yards of the crayons. So this is cut to 41 inches wide by 53 inches long, pretty much as long as I could make it after pre-washing the fabric. Then I did the same size in batting. Now, to talk about batting, it's important as you buy batting to pay attention to how far apart you can do your quilting for your batting. And usually the cheaper the batting, the closer together your lines need to be, because if you don't quilt it enough, the batting will fall apart. So I've seen batting that has to be sewn every 3 to 4 inches, all the way up to 10 inches. So take that into account when you're deciding how you're going to be quilting any quilted project. And also make sure as you're storing scrap pieces that you somehow label your batting so you know what you need to do so that it stays in shape. Then I have done 15-inch squares from the 2 sides that will be the pocket and also the batting. So I'm going to put the quilt part aside for now. And we're going to prepare our pocket, and you're going to prepare the quilt the same way, but at least this I can get onto the camera. So we're going to put the fabrics right sides together, get those evened up, make sure those edges are all lined up. And then we're going to put the batting right on top. So we're making a little sandwich so that when we turn it right side out, the right sides of the fabric will be out and this batting will be sandwiched in the middle. And then you're just going to pin or clip all the way around, and we're going to take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew around the square, which will become the pillow pocket with a 1/4-inch seam, leaving space open to turn it, so 4 or 5 inches, and I'm going to double back and forth just to make sure we can get that turned without pulling any stitches. As I quilt the pillow pocket, I'm going to be using a navy blue top thread and a green bobbin so that the lines of the quilting aren't going to be super obvious. You can do colors that match your fabric, or you can do alternate, totally up to you. This is what I've chosen to do on this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew across the very top edge, a 1/4 inch from the edge. Now you can see, you can't see that top stitch on the front really or the back because I coordinated that. Next, we're going to be doing some quilting. And you can have fun with it. You can do zigzags, you can do whatever you want, but I am just going to do some quick diagonal lines, and I'm going to use my secret weapon, which is painter's tape. I have it in a few different widths, and I'm going to use 2-inch. And what's beautiful about this is it's not going to leave a residue on your fabric, and you can just keep picking it up and moving it. I want to make sure the diagonal line is diagonal from corner to corner, which it wasn't quite. So I'm going to make the piece as big as the corners, and I'm going to put the tape down so that the corner is right in the middle, so basically at that 1 inch. Now I'm just going to sew on either side of this tape, and then I'm going to move the tape, and I will have even 2-inch lines, easy peasy. You can draw lines on there, but I have found this is so quick and easy, and I'm all about that. Let's just get this Quillow done. And if you have one, I recommend a walking foot when you're doing any kind of quilting because it is a little bit thick with the 2 pieces of fabric and the batting in the middle, and that will help it not bunch up because it helps move the bottom and the top fabric at the same time. And I would also use a little bit of a longer stitch. I usually quilt with a 2.9 or 3.0 length stitch. Now I'm just going to line the tape up on the edge of the last stitch mark. Press that down, and now I'm ready to sew exactly 2 inches away from my original stitching. As you get closer to the top, your tape is going to be much, much longer than you need it to be, so you do need to make sure it doesn't stick to your sewing machine as you're beginning to move forward, or it could mess up the evenness of your stitches. So I usually just keep a little bit here, the longer end back here where I can control it a little bit more, and then just keep going. And while 2 inches is right there, I'm not going to sew that because we're already going to be going around that corner, so it is really not needed. I'm going to flip it around and do the other side. Now we have the quilt pocket sewn together and quilted. This is what will be on the outside when it is all folded up, and this is what will be matching the main quilt when it is sewn together. So this is basically the same thing, the same process that we're going to do with the larger quilt. We're going to layer the 3 layers, then we're going to sew them together, flip it right side out, press it. We're going to sew all the way around the outside of the quilt, and then we're going to quilt it. Just make sure you're quilting close enough that your batting is going to do well and not bunch up and fall apart when you put this in and out of the wash. Now I have the quilt section sewn together front to back with the batting in the middle and stitched around the edge. And I'm not going to do the painter's tape guidelines for quilting on this just because it's big and it would be quite a bit of tape to do that. So instead, I'm going to use ruler and a fabric pen. I'm going to mark it on the orange side because pen is just going to show a lot better than on the navy. So I'm going to take the longest ruler that I have so I can do the longest line at a time without having to move it, 36-inch long and 4 inches wide, and I'm just going to go the width of the ruler. And I've decided that since the angled lines that I did on the pillow pocket wouldn't line up perfectly if I did diagonals on this, and because it's much easier to draw lines when you're going parallel to the edges, that I'm just going to have it go in a different direction so it looks like it was intentional and not like it just didn't quite line up. And I'm using a heat erasable pen, which I love because it shows really, really well. And then once we do our stitching, I'm just going to iron over it and it will disappear like magic. So even when it's darker in some spots and later in others, it does not matter at all. Now I just took the easy way and started 4 inches off of an edge, but you'll notice that this isn't going to be 4 inches. So if you really want it to be perfectly symmetrical, you could start with a middle line and then work off the middle line to each side. But I've decided, since this is a project, a kid's project, they are never going to notice, and so I'm just going to do what is a little bit easier for me. I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to do the same thing going the other direction so that our quilting on this is going to be squares. I'm going to turn this around and start my lines from the top so that if there's a skinnier one, it's going to be at the bottom of the quillo and not at the top. And if your lines start to get a little bit fainter than you'd like, just move slower or go back and forth with your pen. I find if I move too fast, they're very faint. Now I have an orange thread in the top and a navy blue in the bobbin to match the crayon fabric. I'm also going to wear my quilting gloves because they have the silicone grip on there, and they will make my hands, it'll make it easier to help move the fabric and keep it straight, because it will help grip that fabric and help me with my quilting process. And I am going to start by going the length of the quilt with the center line. So I'm not starting from an end. I'm going to go the length of the quilt in the center, and then I'm going to find about the center the other direction as well. So I get a big quilted X that will help keep the fabric from shifting too much as I quilt. And the main thing to remember as you move it through is to keep it as flat as possible where you're coming from and as you're going. All right, we got the long way done. Now I'm going to do a center line going in the opposite direction, just to really anchor the fabric, because we've sewn all the way around the edges. We've gone down the center lengthwise. Now we're going to go down the center on the width. I like to hold both the bobbin thread and the top thread while I start and as I knot that thread, so that one of them doesn't kind of get sucked down and create a big knot. Sew along the rest of these lines. And if you don't sew perfectly on the line, don't worry about it, because again, you're going to iron this at the very end and that line will disappear and no one will know exactly where you drew it. We are in the home stretch. Now we have the quilt all done and quilted in both directions every 4 inches. We have the pillow pocket, and we are going to place it with the crayon side up so that when it's open, the crayon side looks like one big piece of fabric, and then when it's folded up, this is going to be on the outside. So the top is the end that we stitched across. You'll notice these sides don't have any stitching yet. We're going to do that next. So the first thing we need to do is we need to find the center of the quilt. So you're just going to fold it in half. Keep your finger on the center. I'm going to put a clip there so I know where the center is, and then I'm going to get that flat again. Now I'm going to fold this in half also, find the center, line that center up, and clip it. I went up a teeny bit from the edge, so I didn't line up these edges of the pocket and that because it's going to be a bit thick if we try and do all of that together. So it's better to put it up a little bit. So if you were doing a quilt where you used regular binding, you would put it up from the binding. But for this, I'm just going to put it up about 1/4 inch. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew these 3 sides. And you're really going to want to reinforce up here. This part stays open because when we fold it, it flips and that's where everything goes in. So this needs to be nice and reinforced so that it's not going to rip. I recommend nice long pins if you have them for this because you are going through 4 layers of fabric and 2 layers of batting. And sometimes a little bit more because when we sewed this together and flipped it, remember there's like 4 layers there too. And if your fabric is directional, you want to make sure you're paying attention and that you are pinning this to the bottom of your quilt and not the top. So you'll notice all the crayons are pretty much going in the same direction. I'm not pinning this on the top where then the pillow ones are going to look mostly opposite of what the rest of the quilt looks like. It's really hard to see where this is. So here is the edge. So we're going to start by going back and forth and then creating a little triangle, just really small, to really reinforce this because there's going to be a lot of pressure on this top edge as you fold and unfold and as kids are going to be using this. So because we have no access to the bobbin thread, At this point, what we're going to do is we're going to put the needle down and we're going to pull it up, and then you're just going to tug and you're going to pull that bobbin thread up through the fabric. See how I did that? So just like you would pull a bobbin thread up if you didn't have anything down, you're just pulling it up through here so that we're still going to be able to hold both the top and the bottom thread when we do a knot. And that is going to reduce the gnarly knots that you sometimes get on the back of a project. I've also switched my bobbin and top thread colors because now the bobbin thread needs to be orange to go with the back and the navy is going to be on top. So let's get this pocket sewn on. So I go down about 1 inch and then I'm going to backstitch all the way to the top again. I'm going to lift my needle and I'm going to twist, and I'm just going to go to like 3 or 4 stitches along the top. I'm going to backstitch again, forward one more time. 1, 2, 3, lift my needle. We're going to pivot, and then we're going to go at an angle back to where we started sewing and then continue down. So that's just really reinforcing that top edge, and we'll do it again when we get to the other top side. If you want to really reinforce it, you can backstitch and forward again on this part. I just remember how hard my son was on these, so I want this thing to stay together and not rip apart. And you'll notice I'm sewing not quite to the edge, so about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the pocket. And now we're to the next top, so we're going to do that reinforcement triangle.
Hello, today we are going to make bean bags. When my son was little, I used to love planning his birthday parties. I was one of those crazy moms that had it at our house, and one of my go-to games was bean bags. And he got new bean bags every year because that had to go with the theme too. Bean bags are great for parties. They could be great for school parties. You just to play and have fun. Something for the kids to do while you're camping, something for the whole family to do while you're camping. So many ways to use this quick and easy sewing project. And I have done a lot of the work for you. First, I want to tell you there's a wide variety of prices when it comes to beans and different sizes. So you want to get dry beans. You can get a little bag of beans. These are kidney beans. Or you can go big and get 8 pounds of beans. My son is 31, and I couldn't remember how big the bean bags were that I used to make for him. So I became Goldilocks and the bean bags. Depending on the size of the square that you make will depend on how many beans you need. This 5.5 by 5.5 inch square, or if you have some 5 by 5 pre-cut scraps, it's going to be about this size. You can use these too. This is going to need a cup of beans. This teeny tiny size is going to need a 1/4 cup of beans, which apparently is what they consider a serving of beans on the back of all of these dry bean bags. And then the size that I am going to recommend you do is the 4.5 by 4.5, which will need a 1/2 cup of beans. If you get a pound, this says 10 servings, that's a 1/4 cup. We need a 1/2 cup, so we can make about 5 bean bags from a pound of beans. That might be good. Now let's look at my big bag. 8 pounds of pinto beans has 103 1/4 cup servings. So I can make about 50 bean bags with this. So you would definitely want to do this if you're doing this for like a community event, or you want to give bean bags as a party favor, or you want to sell them, whatever. That's when you're going to need this big bag. I'm not exactly sure why I need this big bag, except to show it to you now. Now that we have all of those sizes out of the way, let me show you how quick and easy these are to make. Let's start with our supplies. We obviously need beans of some sort. I'm going to be using a measuring cup. I'm going to be doing the 4.5 by 4.5 inch squares, which will need about a 1/2 cup of beans. Now, I can tell you from experience, you do not want to try and pour the beans from this bag into the fabric bag without using a funnel, or they will be everywhere. Guess how I know? So I'm using a piece of cardstock and some tape. We're going to make a funnel. You need a little iron, or you can use any kind of iron. I'm just going to use this little mini one. And then fabric and some clips, rotary cutter and a blade. So I have cut this Paw Patrol fabric. I'm making these for my great nephew. He is a huge fan of this show right now. So it's 4.5 inches wide. I'm just gonna cut as many 4.5 inch squares as I can. And I will start by just cutting off those selvages on the end. All right, I have this folded in half. So that's 1 bean bag, 2 bean bags, 3 bean bags, 4 bean bags, and not quite 5 bean bags. Yeah, that's too small. We'll keep that for something else. Now, if you wanted to fussy cut these, you obviously could. You would need more fabric to get as many. But what I would do if I was going to fussy cut them, this is a 4.5 inch square, so it's exactly the size that I need. And I love it because the blue, it shows you exactly where your seam allowance is. Put him right in the center. Cut that. I'll definitely use that. So you can fussy cut or you can just go with whatever it ends up being. We're going to make 4 bean bags. So you're going to take your 2 squares, you're going to put them right sides together. We're going to sew 3 of the sides with a 1/4 inch seam. And because this is beans, it's not something thin, it's not flaxseed or anything like that. You can just use a regular stitch length. You don't have to go small. Okay, so I have them all matched up. Now we're gonna head to the sewing machine and sew those together. Because these are bean bags that we're making, it isn't going to matter if the seam allowance is off a little bit. So I'm not even going to pin these. I'm just going to line them up, and they're not really big. I'm going to use a leader fabric before we put the first one down, which basically means a scrap piece of fabric that I'm going to have under my foot and over my feed dogs. Then I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to sew from that onto this. That will make sure there are no bird's nests on our actual project, and you don't have to worry about pulling up that bobbin thread. Once you get onto this fabric, you want to go back and forth, and then we're just going to sew the 3 sides with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm just going to cut that off. And then I'm just going to daisy chain these and keep going. You could let them swing around or cut them off as you go. And you can see every seam isn't a perfect 1/4 inch, but it does not matter because, again, it's a bean bag. Now that all 4 of these are sewn together, we are going to clip the corners on those bottom corners where we sewed. And I don't like to cut straight across like that. It's hard to see the thread, sorry, it matches. Because then you still have all of this fabric that needs to go inside. So I like to cut at more of an angle and do 2 clips, making sure you don't snip the stitching. I'm just gonna snip the corners on all 4. Have you ever made bean bags before? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know if this is something that you've done for your kids like I did for mine, if you do it for schools, for church events, or how and when you have used bean bags or how and when you think you might use them. Okay, now we are going to just turn them all right side out. Let's see, using my finger, I really can't get that corner out very well, so I'm gonna grab a turning tool. You can use the tip of a pencil if it's not sharp. You can use a chopstick, just something that you can very gently push that corner out. You don't want to do it hard because you don't want to come through that stitching. So I'm just using this. It has a nice blunt edge, but it does the job. These could be a really cute gift. If you're having family barbecue, you could make 3 or 4 in different fabrics for each child so that they know which is theirs. They can have little contests, kind of like horseshoes, but no big pieces of metal getting thrown around. Just some fun bean bags. And you can throw these into anything. You can use bowls, you can use buckets. You could put hula hoops out on the lawn and you just have to get it into the hula hoop. You could put chalk marks on a driveway and try and aim for a certain spot. Now I'm just going to do a really quick press. Pressing this doesn't need to be super precise because it's going to be full of beans. But the main thing and the main trick is you want to fold this under and press it before you add your beans. So the best way to do that is to take the seam and fold that down first. So fold both of the seams down, and then when you pull like that, the rest is just going to fall into place. And that is going to have these edges held out better than if you tried to start folding on the inside. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so we're gonna prep all 4 of these. If you were to buy the 1-pound bag for $1 at Walmart, each bean bag is going to be about 17 cents in beans. And then your fabric scraps and your time to sew squares together, press and sew this shut. This would be an amazing project if you're looking for things to sew and sell. You can use your scraps of fabric. You can really just whip up a bunch of these all at once, and you can get your pinto beans quite inexpensively if you buy 8 pounds or even go get a Costco size. This would also be a great project to use if you're teaching kids to sew, because it's all straight stitching and then it's something fun that they can go home with. We're done with the iron. So now we need to make our funnel. You can use regular paper, but if you have a little bit thicker, I would recommend that. So we want to make a funnel that's big enough that it's going to be fast and easy, but also make sure that it goes in. So I'm going to leave like 1 inch on either side to make sure it has room to open up. I'm going to test that before I put the tape on. So can I get my fabric on there? Yes, that fits really nicely. Tape that together and we have our bean funnel. So you're going to take your fabric, put in your funnel, take your 1/2 cup of beans, pour that in, that back together, put a little clip on and move on to the next one. Now, if you're doing this with kids, I would put more than 1 clip. I just know that I'm going to be able to hold these closed well as I take them to the sewing machine. If you're newer or you're nervous or you're working with kids, definitely do 2 or 3. So now we got to go back to the sewing machine. Now you want to make sure you keep these edges together and the beans away from where your presser's foot is going to be. So kind of push to keep the beans over here so that's nice and flat. I'm going to use my leader fabric again. And I am using a thread that matches so that it's not going to really show up on the fabric. It made it a little harder for you to see when I was cutting the corners because I had already put that in. Again, just make sure you are holding those beans back away. And when you're sewing these shut, you just want to make sure you're sewing and catching this folded part. You don't want to sew under here and then have that flapping out. One thing I love about bean bags is they're quick and easy and they're not an exact science like some other projects. Then you're just going to cut them apart and cut any of that extra thread off that's in between each bean bag. Now we have 4 bean bags and it is time to go have some fun. Let's start with our supplies. You need 1 piece of fabric that is 25 inches by 15 inches. You need an 8-inch piece of elastic. I use 3/8 inch elastic. You can use whatever, but this is going to be a good size for this when it is all rolled up. I'm also going to be using my Clover hot ruler and my quilting clapper. And of course, ironing board iron, sewing machine, thread, and scissors. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to take our fabric the long way and fold it in half, matching all of these edges. So now it is 12.5 inches by 15 inches. I'm just going to put 2 little clips on each side to make sure it stays folded properly. Then we are going to sew down each side with a 1/4 inch seam. Now before I sew a 1/4 inch down each side, I'm going to grab a leader fabric, which if you haven't seen me talk about this before, is simply a piece of scrap fabric that you're going to put over the feed dogs. And I usually start about 1/2 inch to 1 inch back, put my foot down. Then any bird's nests are going to be back on the leader fabric and you're going to be smooth stitching by the time you get to your project. This works great when you're starting off the end of a project. If you're starting like here or down a little bit, then you would need to raise your bobbin thread to avoid those bird's nests. And I will put a link in the description of this video if you're not sure how to do that. But for now, we're just going to do the leader fabric. We're going to be starting. Then once you get on your project, remember to go back a few stitches just to secure that thread. Then we're going to sew a 1/4 inch down each side. Now we have sewn down both sides. So we have a fold on one side, stitched on 2 sides, and this side is open. You have 2 options. You can either turn it right side out now and then press these 2 edges under a little bit, or my current favorite way is to fold this back and press it before I turn it right side out. The reason I like to do that is because I can see better how far I am turning it over. And we can actually use the hot ruler for this as well. If you center it on here, if we want to do a 1/4 inch, I just push the ruler so that when the fabric flips over the edge, it is at that 1/4 inch mark. That is going to ensure that I get this nice and straight. And I love that with these hot rulers, you can press right on top of it It's a flexible, kind of a fabric-y material. Unfortunately, a crayon got a little too close to it, so I have a little brown mark on there that I don't love, but oh well. Things happen when we're being creative, right? So now I'm gonna turn it over. I'm gonna do the other side. And this is the 14-inch long hot ruler. It's a little bit more expensive, but I would definitely recommend if you like this idea to get the longer one, because you can use it for more things than the shorter one, where you won't have to move it quite as much. Someone in the comments for another video where I was talking about this said they also use cardstock, which you could do. You could draw a line on a piece of cardstock for however far you needed to hem something, and you could do that. You would just need to be careful not to heat it for too long and burn your paper. But that is another option, and a lot of people have cardstock hanging out at their house. You want to try that. So now I'm just making sure that these sides get done, because this is a little bit wider than the ruler and we didn't get all the way to the edge. So I'm basically just matching these other folds, not worrying about the ruler this time. I also like that for shorter spots, you can use the end of the ruler. It has the markings all the way around. Now, before I turn it right side out, I'm just going to clip that corner. Obviously, you don't want to clip the side that's folded, just the side that's sewn, to help us get a better point. And we're going to turn it right side out, pushing these corners out. Now, if we did that correctly, these two folds should line up nicely. So I always start pressing from there. And now you just need to make sure the fabric is pushed out so that you're not folding any of that seam in. That'll give you a nice straight edge. And you're going to be pressing the fold as well. So taking a minute and taking your time on this step is what is going to give you a nicely shaped crayon holder. We all know everyone who likes crayons is really particular about that. Okay, maybe they aren't. Now it is time to do our folds. Let's look at the sample. So we have folded up from both sides. This was the open edge. This was the folded edge. So it's basically like this. I have my open edge over here. We're going to fold this side and fold this side. Next, we're going to take our hot ruler again, make sure it is lined up straight along the edge. We're going to fold that up, and we need it to be 2.5 inches up. So this is a little bit further than that, so I'm just going to slowly scooch it back, pushing it with the ruler until this edge is on that 2.5 inch mark, and then I'm going to press. If you want a crisper press, just take this ruler out and just run your iron over it one more time, and then also run your quilter's clapper or piece of wood over that. It absorbs the heat. That's warm now, so it doesn't burn your hand as much, but just takes the heat out of the fabric and makes the pressed edges that much crisper. Now let's press the other side. Pair that again. All right, this one's gonna be a teeny bit taller, like a teeny bit. There'll be a little bit more space in between the crayons. Not sure how I did that. This one might have been 14 inches instead of 15, but either is going to work. I have so many notes about these roll-ups, I apparently picked the wrong direction. So now that both of these are folded, we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we are going to stitch the channels for the crayons. Before we head over there, I'm going to show you how that's going to work. So for regular size crayons, I do 1 inch increments. So you can do this one of two ways. I usually try and pick a print that has one main color. So I'm going to be using a thread that kind of goes with this teal for this one. And for this one, I did one that matched this burgundy, because I just wanted to sew once all the way across. So my stitch line goes from this end to this end. If you really don't want to sew across the middle, you can sew from here to here for every one of these and over here, but that is like 24 different stops and starts, which to me is too much. I'd rather do 12 and go all the way across, making both of these channels at the same time. So that is what I'm going to show you how to do. The first thing we are going to do is we're going to sew a little less than 1/4 inch from the folded edge of the fabric, going over both of these crayon holder folds, and I'm going to be using the leader fabric again. And I always use my scissors just to make sure this doesn't flip up as the presser foot is coming onto my project. And then I do the same thing to make sure it doesn't flip this next fold up as well. We're going to be using this leader fabric every time, so you're just going to cut it off after each stitch line. The next thing you need to do is decide how you're going to measure these 1-inch increments when you're sewing. So we need to sew 1 inch from here. So an easy way to do this one would be to run this stitch line along your 1-inch guide on your needle plate. Then it just gets a little bit trickier because you don't know if you're going straight when you're seeing this. So here's 3 different ways to do these markings. Number 1, you could take a pen or a pencil and draw lines all the way across in 1-inch increments, but that's never my favorite way. Another way is to use 1-inch painter's tape, and this is what I used on the 8 crayon one. I demonstrated this. So using the painter's tape is a little bit harder on this one because it is so much wider. You're going to need a much bigger piece of tape. But here's how you would do it. You would take your tape and you would put it right at that stitch line on the one side and press that down. I usually want it slightly smaller than my fabric because I don't want it sticking to my sewing machine and causing things to not move well. And then you would simply sew just to the side of the tape. Make sure you don't sew the tape. If you do sew the tape a little bit, it's not the end of the world. You're just going to have to take a minute and pick it out. And you'll notice I just sewed straight across. I didn't stop, so my stitching is going to go all the way through. And then what you would do is you would just pick up this tape and move it and do your next stitch line. Now, one thing that I haven't done yet on this is if you are making this for littler kids or think they might be a little rough getting their crayons in and out, you can backstitch on each part of this fold. I've just sewn straight across and assumed it'll be fine. But if you want it to be a little bit more sturdy, you want to go right off the edge and then take a few stitches back and then keep going. And then you would do the same thing when you get to the fold on the other side. Now, the tape method works great. You will probably be able to use one piece of tape all the way across this crayon roll. I found it usually resticks well 8 to 10 times. We would need to make it work 12 times, which you probably could. But let me show you the third way, which is actually my preferred way, and I think is honestly the best way if you're going to be making multiple crayon rolls. So one very unfortunate thing is when I don't click one specific button on my camera and it tries to autofocus and everything then is out of focus. So I'm having to redo this part where I'm showing you my favorite way of stitching all of these crayon lines. And that is with a seam guide. It may be metal or it may be plastic. It basically has this part that rests on the project. So this would go down the seam line to the right of where you want to be sewing. And then this goes through the foot. Just check your manual because this might be different for each sewing machine. I'm putting it on a walking foot on a Janome sewing machine. And there is a little hole back here. And I just push that through. And the point's coming out the other side. You can't really see it because I want you to be able to see this side. I'm going to line this guide up so that it is on the 1-inch line on my needle plate. And then I know that when I have this resting on the stitch line that I just did, my needle will be 1 inch from there. So I can sew in 1-inch increments. This is great for straight line machine quilting as well as doing things like this. What you're going to do is you're just going to complete all of these pockets so that you have 12. And if you sew straight across, it is going to make the 12 on the one side and the 12 on the other side. Now it is time to add our elastic. And so what you're going to do is you're going to fold it in half, matching these raw edges, and we're going to tuck it inside the long part of the fold. So not inside the crayon section, right, this shorter section. We're going to do it inside of the longer part. Let me show you how to figure out where it goes. If we look at our other one, when it's open, it's like this. Then when it folds, it's like this. And you want the elastic to be close to halfway so that when you roll it up, it's going to be close to the center to hold that together. You don't want it up too high and you don't want it down too low. So that placement means you would fold this in half and you want it to be centered. So then I'm just going to pick that up and do that. This is our last stitch line. So basically we have 13 across and then the other two. So we sew 15 straight lines and do a little bit of ironing, and we make a crayon roll or a crayon holder for 24 crayons. Not too bad. You want to sew this a little bit less than 1/4 inch as well, just to make sure you are catching those raw edges and sealing that up and have enough space for the crayon. I'm going to make sure the elastic is straight, and then I'm going to use the scissors to just hold that all down. And because this is going to be pulled on and off of the crayon roll regularly, I'm going to go back and forth to reinforce that stitching. Now all that's left is to grab our box of 24 crayons and put them in the holder. Now one other thing I didn't mention about these crayon holders, I usually like to do a darker fabric versus a white, because as crayons are going in and out of these and being loved and used for creativity, you will get some markings on the fabric, and it's a little bit less noticeable on something with a more color or a darker color. But if they get too bad and it bothers anyone, these can go through the laundry. So let me know in the comments who you are going to make these for. Are you going to make them for someone you love? Are you going to make them to donate? Are you going to make them to sew and sell? I would love to hear what your plans are. If you love easy sewing projects like this, things to sew and sell, things to make for your home, things to make for gifts, or beginner to intermediate quilting, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit that bell so YouTube lets you know every time I upload something new. Let's just have so much fun together. Sorry, I couldn't resist the pun. They're back! Scrunchies! I remember making these when I was in high school and college back in the late 80s and 90s, and I am so excited they have made a comeback. They are so quick and easy to make, great for summer, just getting your hair out of your face, perfect for a sleepover party bag, bachelorette party, girls trip, or just because. This would also be a great project to sew and sell. So let me show you how quick and easy these are to whip up. First, let's look at what you need. Most scrunchies can be made out of a piece of fabric 18 inches wide by 5 inches high. If you want it to be a little bit fuller, you could do it 20 inches, but I wouldn't go much beyond that, or it's going to be hard to sew the elastic. Speaking of elastic, I use a 3/8 inch flat braided elastic for making scrunchies. How long do you want that to be? The most common size is 6 inches long. If you're making this for someone with really thick hair, you might go to 8 inches. If you're making it for a child, you might try 5, but I would start with 6 and see how it goes. I have pretty fine hair. This works for me. My daughter-in-law has thick hair, and it worked for her too, but she said it stayed better and was a little bit fluffier when she used an elastic band on her hair before putting the scrunchie on. Then you're going to need a pin to get the elastic through this once we get it sewn together. You don't have to have a hot ruler, but it is a pretty cool tool, and if you haven't tried it before, I want to show you how that works. Same with the clapper. Don't have to have it. I just love it. I'll show you how that works. And then you need an iron. I'm just going to use this little baby one because we are only doing one ironing spot along one short edge, so it's super quick and easy. Let's get started. The first thing we need to do is we need to iron one of these short edges over by 1/4 inch. And here is how a hot ruler works. It's very flexible, it's a little bit fuzzy to the touch, and you can iron right on it. So what you do is you line it up and you make sure, just by looking like I'm going to use the 8-inch line for no particular reason, and make sure it is on that edge, because otherwise you're going to be ironing crooked. But that's a good, easy way to get that quickly lined up. Then you just kind of guess, okay, that's about 1/4 inch. Now let's fold it over, and if the edge hits that 1/4 inch mark, you're like, yay, we are good to go. Then you can just hold that down and press right over it. Then I use my quilter's clapper just to press that a little bit more, get the heat out of it, and it is ready to sew. Now, this does have a teeny bit of thickness to it, so sometimes I will come back over it and press again, just to really get that fold creased nicely. You know, this is kind of a novelty to use for a project like this, but then you're not having to hold it as much with your fingers. It works really well when you're having to fold over a really long edge. So this is one of my favorite kind of novelty sewing and quilting tools that I wanted to share with you. Now I'm just going to sew straight down just to hold that fold down, but to make sure that your thread doesn't get sucked in to your machine and create a big old bird's nest, I'm going to put it under the foot. I'm going to use a leader fabric. This is just a scrap piece of fabric. I'm going to butt up to the back edge of this, I'm going to actually start sewing on the leader fabric. Because then if you get any bird's nest, it's going to be back here. It will be cut off of your project and you'll be sewing smoothly by the time you hit your scrunchie. Once you're on your scrunchie fabric, you're going to go forward and back a little bit just to knot that. And I had that stitch length set a bit small for this because I'd use a smaller stitch length when I do the elastic. So you can use like a 2.4, 2.5 for this part. I'm going to switch that. Now I'm going to fold it in half, right sides together, and we are just going to sew down the long edge, leaving both of the short ends open so that we can put the elastic all the way through. And I'm going to use that leader fabric again. Now I'm just going to cut that leader fabric off again. Keep that for the next thing. And now we're going to go back and turn this right side out and string the elastic through. Now I'm just going to turn this right side out. I like to turn it right side out from the sewn edge because this is a raw edge and it'll fray a little bit more. And I've tried different ways. It's wide enough and short enough that I just do it with my fingers and I just push it through, reach in there and pull it out. If you want to use a turning tool or a safety pin, you can, but I don't know that it really saves you all that much time versus doing it this way. If you're making a lot of scrunchies, this would be a great thing to do while you're watching TV. So that leads me to a question. Do you watch TV while you sew? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you listen to audiobooks? I'm curious. And if you have any suggestions for things to watch or listen to, I'm sure I and others would love to. So now that's right side out. I'm going to take a pin. I'm just using a quilting pin, kind of longer. You can use any kind you want. And I'm just going to put that all the way through the tube. You want to make sure you hold on to this end. So your fabric is going to get really bunched up. Because remember, our fabric is 18 inches long. This is 6 inches long. So it's nice and bunchy. So now we have it like that. Now we are going to overlap it a little bit. I probably overlap that just under a 1/2 inch. And I'm going to sew that together. I usually sew down one angle and across and try and keep it lined up as well as possible. It is a little bit tricky. I'm going to clip it together just so it doesn't pop apart and go inside my fabric as we head back to the sewing machine. So this is not only a little tricky to sew, but also a little tricky to film so that you can see what I'm doing and not just see the scrunchie. So I'm going to do my very best. I always have the fabric in front of me because I do have a walking foot on there and I really don't want this pulled around by either the feed dogs or the walking foot. And I'm going to be using my leader fabric again, make sure it's covering the feed dogs and is under here just so we have something to move. Now I have to take the clip off or I won't be able to get it under, and you'll see it's only overlapping a teeny bit and we want to keep it as straight as possible. If it doesn't stay perfectly straight, it's fine. It's going to be on the inside. But the goal is to keep it lined up. So sometimes I'll just take my scissors, and hold it in place as I get it under here. I'm using the leader fabric because trying to lift the bobbin thread and hold this little piece of elastic together and all of that at the same time, it's just a lot. So I just do this. And that did not stay very straight. So while the needle is down, I'm just going to lift my foot and I'm going to line that back up. And I actually overlapped that a little bit less than intended, but I went back and forth a few times, so it should be good, and it will get secured one more time when we sew the two pieces of fabric together. So now you have two options. You have one of the raw edges, and then the other end is finished. So if you want it to look perfectly store-bought, you can just put one inside the other, the raw edges inside the finished one, and you could hand stitch around the edge so that it looks perfect. That to me is not quite worth it. I'm going to sew straight across with my sewing machine because once you get this on your head, you're not really going to notice that this is going to be a bit flatter because it is sewn in a seam. So what I'm doing is I'm lining this up and I'm lining up the seam on both sides of this. I'm going to make sure that this is flat, and then I'm just going to sew straight across. That will also give me one more stitch line through the elastic. That is how easy it is. You can sew this up in probably 10 minutes or less, and if you wanted to make a bunch, you just do each section at the same time. On this white one, I did one that was 18 inches and one that was 20 inches long. I honestly can't tell which was which. I think this one has a little more rippling, so this probably has 20 inches, so it's going to look a little bit fuller when used, but not a huge difference. So whether you're making them 18 inches long or 20 inches long, you can get 2 scrunchies out of every 5-inch strip if you're going selvage to selvage or width of fabric. So it is a very cost-effective project and cute and fun. Let me know in the comments who you're going to make these for. Are you going to sell them? Are you going to give them as gifts? Are you going to use them as party favors, trip things? I would love to know.
Welcome back. In today's episode, we are going to be making this really easy zipper pouch. I was able to get my hands on some Barbie fabric licensed by the Riley Blake Designs, the fabric company that I also work with. So we're going to be doing hot pink outside, and look at these cute little shoes we're going to put inside. Of course, you can use any fabric that you want, but I thought it would be fun to use this while we all are in hot pink Barbie movie mania. Let's get started. To get started, you need some materials. So to make a bag this size, which has a finished size of about 6 inches by 10 inches, and I did put about a 1-inch box pleat on the bottom of that, we're going to take 2 pieces of fabric, outside, inside, 10.5 inches wide by 14.5 inches long. If you're using a directional fabric, you need your fabric to be going this way because the bag is going to fold like this. I have already added fusible fleece to the back of our lining just to save time. And I used the Pellon 987F fusible fleece. It's one that I just always keep on hand. I like it just to give a little bit more stiffness and body to bags and different projects. Then I'm going to use a pink zipper. You can use a 9-inch zipper, but I often like to use zippers that are longer than my project, especially if you are new to zippers. This is going to be easier for you to sew on because you will be able to get your zipper completely out of the way as long as you have it lined up correctly, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm also going to share my trick for how to make zippers sewing easier using this Easy Steam 2 two-sided adhesive fusible tape. This thing, game changer. It took the stress of zippers away. Absolutely love it. Then we have cut a piece that is 15 inches by 2 inches for the little strap. I have a little lobster clasp on a D-ring to put on that. And then you just need a little piece for this little loop here that you can hook things onto. Let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get these ends out of the way. So I'm going to open this a little bit, just so it's not in the way of us dealing with those ends. I'm going to grab my Easy Steam adhesive. I'm going to put a little piece right on the top here, and then you're just going to press down on that. And then you're going to just carefully peel the paper off of it. Sometimes you have to get your nail or even a pin under it just to get the sticky part to come off and stay on the zipper. Then we are going to fold that tab down, and it's going to have to go at an angle so that it doesn't cover the metal part of the zipper stop. Now, if you don't have this adhesive, you could glue that down. You could also use a pin and go put a little stitch in that to hold it down, but this really works great, and I love this stuff for the next part of the zipper, so I highly recommend that you give it a try. Okay, so we have them both tacked down. You want to put your lining fabric, which you have your fusible fleece or interfacing on, face up on your workspace. Then you're going to open your zipper wider than the fabric, and we're going to flip it over for right now, and we're going to put the Easy Steam 2 tape along the back of the zipper and take the paper off. Now we're going to turn it back over so that the zipper pull is up, and we're going to line this up with the top edge of our lining fabric. And you want the metal zipper part to be about 1/4 inch to 5/8 of an inch from the edge of your fabric. When you have that lined up nicely, nice and straight along the top edge, you're going to press down and adhere that to the fabric. And you can move it a little bit. You can see it looks a little bit crooked. So we're going to just keep adjusting till it looks nice and straight. Now we're going to grab another piece of this tape and we're going to go across the top. And this is what we're going to attach the outer fabric to. You don't want it to be too close to the zipper teeth. You want it to be towards the outer edge where we're going to be sewing. Now we're going to take our outer fabric, we're going to turn it over, we're going to make sure that we pay attention and get it lined up so it's it's staying straight over top of the lining, and we're going to line up this top edge right over top of the zipper and press down. This, my friends, is a game changer in the zipper business. If you don't have this and you want to do the zipper, you can also put the 3 together and clip it, but you have a lot more chance of things moving a little bit as you're sewing if you're just clipping versus adhering it like this. Now we're going to sew the zipper. We're going to keep the pull way out here so it's not going to get in the way at all. This piece is just going to hang off. Going to use a zipper foot, and you're just going to sew right along the edge so that this zipper will be in straight. So now we have that for the one side. I'm going to take this really quick to my ironing board, and I'm going to press it so that both sides are pulled away from the zipper, and then we're going to come back and top stitch. I just pressed that so it's nice and even. Now with the zipper foot still in, I'm just going to run a quick top stitch right along the edge. I'm going to keep using the white thread. You can change to a hot pink if you want to, or whatever color coordinates, totally up to you. One side is done. Let's head back to the workstation and I'll show you how to line up the other side of the zipper. Now we need to do the same thing, tape these 2 fabrics onto this half of the zipper. So let's get started. We need to close the zipper halfway just to make sure we have all of the teeth lined up evenly, because if we don't have the teeth lined up evenly, when we attach this, then the zipper's not going to work and everything's going to pull. You make sure the metal's going to be lined up. Everything's good to go. We're going to run a piece of this tape along the top of the zipper at this outer edge. Okay, going to get that tape on, then make sure you have the zipper lined up again. And now what we are going to do is we are going to fold our outer fabric up. And before we attach it, we want to make sure that it's staying straight along this edge. And then we need to get it lined up with that edge of the zipper. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to turn it over to be able to see exactly where we're going. So don't press firmly until you know that you have everything lined up well. So now you'll see we have this loop of the outer fabric, and now we need to deal with the inner fabric. So we're going to turn that back over again, and we're going to put the tape along this side of the zipper. Now we're going to fold this side up, making sure, again, it's staying lined up on both sides and that the top is lined up with the edge of the zipper and the top of the outer fabric, basically making a zipper sandwich. And again, if you don't have this tape, you can do the same thing and use pins or clips. So this is what it looks like on the side. We basically have 2 loops of fabric and the zipper. And because we have this nice and secure where we want it, and we are using a longer zipper so that that pull isn't in our way while we sew, I'm going to reach my hands in here and I'm going to open that zipper. So I'm going to pull that out so it is not in our way. I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this zipper just like we did the last one. Now we're going to use our zipper foot and sew this zipper. Now I'm going to turn this right side out and I'm going to press that and bring it back to top stitch just like we did last time. Now we're going to make the little loop for attaching things like this little wristlet, which we are also going to be making. So we have our fabric. This is 1.5 by 2.5 for the loop. And this one is 15 by 2 for the wristlet. I don't keep water in my iron. I like to just mist with a little sprayer bottle. Do you use steam with your iron or do you add water externally? Let me know in the comments. I would love to know what your preference is and if you have a reason. Okay, so we're gonna fold that in half, iron that, and that's going to create a nice little crease for us. We're gonna open that back up and then we're gonna fold these raw edges into the crease. And on this one that is so small, you can just finger press that outer edge, fold it again, and press again. All right, so that one is ready. Now we're going to make the wristlet strap. I'm gonna put it like this, and I've already spritzed this with water. So because this one is so long, it's next to impossible to get it straight and finger press. So I'm gonna do each side at a time, folding that raw edge into the crease and pressing along that edge without pressing the center crease out of my fabric. So you're just kind of using the tip and moving along. Have you ever used a tailor's clapper? It's really cool. I'm going to show you what it does. So a tailor's clapper or a quilter's clapper is basically a piece of wood that has this nice groove that's really easy to hold, and it helps you really set your creases. A lot of quilters really like it because when they're pressing seams open, it gets a nice sharp edge to it. I like to use it for things like this too, because as you go along, sometimes it pops up a little bit. So if you come back with this wood, it takes the heat out of it. And you press down and it keeps it really flat and it makes that fold a lot sharper. Now we're going to go back to the sewing machine. We're going to just do a quick stitch here so that we can make that loop when we put the whole bag together. And I'm going to show you how to sew this together and get the lobster clasp with the D-ring on this piece. So we're just going to run a stitch really close to the edge to keep this together. And this is going to be the little loop for the bag. Now we're going to do the wristlet loop that is going to have this on here. So we are going to go down the edge to sew this fold together so that our raw edges are never to be seen again. And we're going to leave about 1 inch to 1.5 inches open on each end. Okay, so for our wristlet, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the clasp onto the fabric. Then we are going to open these ends and we are going to pin them with the right sides together. Now we are just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam across that front. I never sew across pins because I have hit more than I care to and bent needles. Do you live dangerously and sew across pins, or do you take them out as you sew? Let me know in the comments. Go back to your iron and press this seam open and then press this folded closed again so that you can stitch and finalize that and it won't be really visible how you got this loop put together. So I'm going to go do that. I'll be right back. Before I do this stitch to get these all together, I want to make sure one more time that it's not twisted. If it is twisted, just grab your seam ripper, open that up, and redo it. I'm just going to finish this edge stitch, turn that so it is coming out of the circle. Then you're just going to fold right like that. So we have that seam that we just sewed right there at that D-ring. And now I'm just going to run a little stitch here to hold that in place. Now we have our detachable Barbie wristlet that you can use on this bag or other things. Let's go finish up that bag. We're getting so close. Now what we're going to do is we're going to close this zipper halfway so that the zipper pull is on the inside and the lining is on the outside. And we are going to move it, because it's basically just a big old roll, right? A roll with a zipper. We're going to move it to however high you want your zipper to be from the top. This one that I did, it's about 1.5 inches down. I think I'm going to try this one a little bit higher. So I'm going to make it about 1 inch from that top fold. Now we're going to make sure that these edges are all lined up. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put 2 pins up here to make sure that this zipper stays in place. And I'm going to put them in far enough that I don't have to take them out while I'm sewing. But we want to make sure that these little metal hooks stay lined up. Then, always handy to have one as a sample, right? I like to have the hook on the opposite side of where the zipper is closed. So when this zipper is closed, it's going to be over here. So we are going to put this loop over here above the zipper. Speaking of the zipper, it is time to cut it off. Just a plastic zipper teeth. So you can cut it with scissors, but don't use your fabric scissors. You don't want to mess them up. Use some craft scissors and just cut that off even with the edge. So we're done. Thank you very much. Little zipper piece that made our zipper life easier. Off you go. So now this, I'm going to fold in half. The raw edges, I'm going to line up with these raw edges, and I'm going to just put that right in there above the zipper. And I'm going to clip that with a clip. I'm going to clip both sides in place, and we're going to sew straight down here, and then we're going to zigzag. Now you need to decide if you're going to do just a flat bag, you're just going to start sewing now. But see, on this one, I gave it a little bit of a box corner. So if you want to do that, we're going to make some marks now. To make a 1.5 inch box pleat, you're going to measure up 3/4 of an inch. So you're going to measure up from the bottom half the distance that you want your bag to be wide. So if you wanted it to be 3 inches wide, you're going to measure up 1.5 inches. So that would be a much deeper box and shallower bag. So we're going to do 3/4 of an inch. And I'm just going to take this pen. It's a heat sensitive pen. It will disappear when you iron it. It's really cool. Oh, great. I picked right at a pink shoe. Of course I did. So we can see that. And I'm just marking this now to save some time because we're going to go straight all the way down. But then when we zigzag, we're only going to go to this line because we need to be able to make that box. And because I'm not sure which side I'm going to have to fold it, I'm going to mark it on both sides. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Back to the sewing machine. Now we're going to go straight down with a 1/4 inch seam, and if you lined this up correctly, you should be just on this side of these metal things. Just go really slow when you're going over the zipper part and make sure you do not hit that metal or you will definitely have a broken needle. And I do like to go backwards over the zippers just to make sure it is nice and secure. And now we're going to do the other side. Now on this side, we are going to be sewing through some of those plastic teeth. So just go really slowly. And also remember that the little loop is right here. So we're going to go from here to here. We're going to go forward, back, and then forward just to secure that zipper and that loop. Just go slow. Now just take a minute and cut off some of these frayed edges before you do your zigzag. You can also take out these pins now. All right, can you see my needles right here? I'm going to switch to a zigzag stitch and you'll see it moved over to the right. And that is basically going to be the outside of the zigzag. So I'm going to have that needle position right off the edge of my fabric. And then I'm just going to zigzag all the way to this line. Now, if you were keeping it flat, it's time to turn it, but we're going to do these little boxed corners. So what we're going to do, so you're going to make it a triangle right at that line. So it's even on both sides, and then you're just going to stitch across in a straight line. It's all over except the turning right side out. We're going to start to flip it, and then I like to just put my hand in here and open that zipper more because it just makes it that much easier. I'm going to open those beautiful box corners, and then we're going to flip and push out those top corners. And there's our little loop. You're going to hook this on here. So how would you use a bag like this? Would you put makeup in it? You could use it in your car. This could also be super cute for a slumber party favor. Fill them with like some candy, a hairbrush, maybe a scrunchie or a sleep mask. I'd love to know what you think you would use this kind of a bag for. Drop me a comment. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you never miss a thing. Today I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is to make what I call a button-up scarf. And this is how it looks. It's basically a scarf that goes around your neck and you button it together. And it's really cute extra way to stay warm when it's cold outside. So here's what you need. You need 2 strips of fabric. These are folded in half, 10.5 inches tall by anywhere from 29 to like 34, 35 inches wide. The wider you go, the less tight it's going to be and better for a larger neck. You can go smaller for kids. So you need 2 of those. I'm using flannel from my Hello Winter flannel collection by Riley Blake. You need 3 buttons, or you could use 2 bigger buttons or 1 really big button, totally up to you, but buttons. 2 pieces of interfacing. These are 2 inches wide by the 10.5, thread and clips. So let's get started and I'll show you how easy this is to make. So one thing to consider when choosing fabrics is I usually use a darker fabric and not white for the inside because this scarf does fit pretty snugly around the neck, and if people are wearing makeup or get sweaty, like that's going to show dirt more. So I think going darker is better. And then if you're going to use a directional design, you want it to be going this way, lengthwise. So the first thing we're going to do is put these right side together. And then you're going to put the piece of interfacing on each end. That's just going to give a little bit more stability for your buttonholes and your buttons. And then I like to use these clips. You can clip or pin. And you're just going to clip all the way around. So then you're going to have a big rectangle, clips all the way around, and this on each end. Then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew all the way around, leaving a small space to turn it with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now that I've sewn all the way around and left some space for turning right side out, I'm going to trim the corners. And the reason I do such a big seam allowance is sometimes with the warmer fabrics, fleece or flannel, it slips a little bit. So it's easier to do a little bigger seam allowance than have it not catch all of your fabric. So I'm just trimming these corners, and because it's a bigger seam allowance, I'm kind of cutting a little bit more to get some of the bulk out of that corner. All right, now you're just going to turn it right side out. All right, so I use my fingers to get the corners, but then you can get them a little bit more if you use a turning tool. I'm going to use this cute little flamingo from Riley Blake Designs, and just very gently pushing to shape that corner a little more cornerish, but don't go too hard because you don't want to jam that thing through your fabric, especially with flannel, it's softer. So you have a little more risk of that. Now I'm going to press this and press that seam under, and then stitch all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam from the edge. All right, now I have this, it's just a big long rectangle. So now I'm going to show you how to figure out where to put your buttonholes and where to put your buttons. So if we're doing 3 buttons, the buttonholes are going to go on the short edge when the pattern is in the right direction. And then the 3 buttons are going to go on the opposite side down at the bottom. So we're going to have holes here, buttons here, and I'm going to show you how to line them up. So the first thing we're going to do is set where our buttonholes go. I have a fabric pen and a ruler, and then I'm also going to use 3 pins. Okay, put the 1 inch, an inch along the edge, and then I'm going to mark, just do a little dot at 1.5 inches. This isn't the easiest to see on this fabric, but I can see it when I'm sewing. And then at the 3 inches, shows up great on that color, and then 4.5 inches. So it's basically right at that dot on that snowflake. But just because they are a little hard to see, I also put a pin so I know where to look when I get to my sewing machine. So then I'm going to do buttonholes that are the size for these buttons. And because everyone has a different sewing machine, this isn't really a buttonhole tutorial. You're going to make your buttonholes however you do them with your machine for the size buttons that you choose. You can use bigger buttons. If you did bigger buttons, you would want to maybe use 2. I don't have a really good color to go with it, but you could do 1 if you just want a really cool like accent button. And if you wanted to do something like that, I would put the buttonhole right around the 3 inch mark. That's going to be kind of center that. That would be a good spot for 1 button. So that's totally up to you. So get your buttonholes done, and then I will show you how to figure out where these buttons go very specifically so that this works. So I've sewn my 3 buttonholes, and then I'm going to use this cool little seam ripper from Riley Blake. It just fits on your finger. It's awesome. And just very carefully open the buttonholes. If you're worried about moving too fast, you could put a little pin at the end, but I like to go nice and slow. All right, so that opens the buttonholes. So now we need to place, don't need the ruler, we need to place our buttons. So remember, when you put this on, this wraps around your neck, so your neck is in here, and then it lines up on the far side here. It feels kind of weird when you are just placing things, but I promise that's how it works. So our buttons are going to go there. So what I do is I just make sure this edge is lined up and this edge is lined up, and then I open the buttonhole a little bit and I do a mark in the center of the buttonhole. All right, so I have 3 marks Again, just because of the color mark pen I have, not super easy to see. So I'm going to put pins just so I know where to look for my marks. But you can do that however you want, but that is how you're going to get them lined up. So the next thing to do is to go and sew my buttons. So we're going to get that done, and then I'm going to show you how to put it on. This is just such a quick and easy project. It is literally a rectangle of fabric with buttonholes and buttons. Great gift, great thing to make and sell at craft fairs. You can also use other materials. I've done it with cotton fabric and fleece on the back. If you want this to be even warmer, you could do flannel on one side, fleece on the other side. So you can create any look that you want. Also great for holiday gifts. Okay, the moment of truth, putting it on. So you're just going to grab the rectangle. This is the back. Have the buttonholes on the right. Put it around your neck like a scarf. Grab the bottom buttonhole, pull it around and put it on the bottom, the button closest to the short edge on this side. And then just button all 3 or 2 or 1, depending on how many buttons you put on yours. And then you just need to adjust it. So you're just going to twist this a little bit. You're going to line up this short side with this long side so that it makes kind of that triangular shape. And you can fold it down a little if you want a little more air at your neck. If it's really cold, just keep it up. And you'll see that then when you put your jacket on, it keeps your neck and chest nice and warm. And it's just kind of cute and different. So hope you like that. They're super easy.
If you or someone you love finds their happy place in the garden, you're going to love this tutorial today for a 5-pocket garden apron. 2 big pockets, 3 smaller ones to hold all your gardening stuff. And it is so easy to make. I'm also going to show you how to make these ties. You always see them on Pinterest and social media where it's super cute and it's tied around in the front, usually on a petite model. So I'm going to show you how to measure and figure out what size you need to make you look cute no matter what your waist size. Because I'm going to admit, the basic size doesn't fit my waist. So you're not alone if it doesn't fit yours. Ready to get started? Let's look at what we need. So first, you're obviously going to need some fabrics. And here are what you need. I'm going to be using these chickens for both the front and the back of the fabric. So I've cut 2 pieces, 20 inches by 13 inches. Then for the first pocket, the taller pocket, I'm going to use these cute little windmills. And this is all from my Spring Barn Quilts fabric collection from Riley Blake Designs. So it feels a little weird that the pocket is actually bigger than the apron, but we're going to be folding it in half. So just trust me on this. I've made more than one. So for the bigger pocket, you're going to cut 20 by 16 inches. Then the smaller pocket is going to be black, and you're going to cut that 20 by 10 inches. Then you need 2 sashes, which you can do with the fabric cut off the selvage 4 inches wide and just see how that fits. And you might have to tie it in the back, you might have to tie in the front, or you can jump ahead and see where I show you how to measure and figure out exactly how long you need it to be for you or someone else if you can measure their waist and make it so that it's going to tie super cute in the front, like all the garden aprons you see on social media. The last piece of fabric is going to be the waistband, and I decided for this one to have my waistband match the bigger pocket. If you look at this other one, I did that a little bit differently. So I did a waistband that matched the color, but not the exact same fabric. So on this one, I used 4 different fabrics, and I also did a scrappy sash where I put together some different fabric scraps that were all 4 inches wide and made it as long as I wanted, versus today, we are going to just use the single or the 2 long pieces of fabric. So that's your fabric. Now, it's really important that a garden apron have some stability to it because it's going to have heavier things in it like trowels and your phone and I don't know, all kinds of things that you don't want just flopping around. So you need some interfacing. You can use any kind of medium weight. What I used was this ES114 Easy Shaper Interfacing from Pellon. I just went and bought one packet, which was 20 inches by 1 yard or 36 inches. I got the 3 pieces that I need, and then I have another 20-inch by 9-inch piece to use for something else. So for your interfacing, you're just going to cut a 1/2 inch smaller than the outside and both of the pockets. That's your basic supplies. The first step is to get our interfacing on the back of our 3 pieces. I'm going to put it on the back of the apron front, which in my case, I'm using the same for the front and back, so it doesn't really matter. But if you're going to use different fabric on the front and back, I would recommend putting your interfacing on the front, and then we will do the 2 pockets. So grab your fabric, you're going to turn it upside down on your ironing board, and just make sure whatever kind of interfacing you use that you follow the manufacturer's instructions. So I do have those right here to check on. And then a fusible interfacing always has a little bit of a shiny side and a duller side. The shiny side is the fuse. So it is the stuff that you're going to heat and adhere to your fabric. So you want to put that shiny side down against your fabric. And we cut it so that it will be about a 1/4 inch smaller than our piece of fabric, because we don't need all this added bulk in our seams. And you do not iron right on this. You want to use a pressing cloth, which is basically a thin piece of cotton. And the directions say that it should be damp. Well, I'm not going to take it to my sink. I'm going to use this cute little sprayer. So I'm just going to keep moving my iron. You could also use a heat press. So if you have a big heat press or you have like a Cricut heat press, you could use that. And then you're going to be able to do a bigger area at once. When you think you have that all pressed properly, just lift it up and check the corners. Oh, this one, so it's pretty good, but I didn't quite hit the corners well. So just put your pressing cloth back down and give that a little bit more heat. You want to make sure it's just adhered nicely all the way across your fabric and definitely on those edges. Now let me show you how to do the pockets. And because we're going to be folding this fabric to make the pocket so that the inside is covered, we didn't need a piece of interfacing that covered the entire fabric like with the outside. We just need to cover half. So again, check that the fusible side is down and put it down on one long end and just leave a little bit for the seam allowance. And then we're just going to do the same thing. Put that pressing mat down, get a little dampness where that interfacing is, and press. And I'm going to do this for both of the pockets. So we have the interfacing on 1/2 of each of the pockets. So now we're just going to fold the other half down. We're going to line up all those edges and we're going to press the top edge of the pockets. So there's one. Now we have our 3 fabrics, the apron front, the bigger pocket, and the smaller pocket with the interfacing all lined up. Now we are going to do our lines to make our 5 pockets, and I'm going to show you how we're going to flip and stitch to get that done. So the first one we're going to do is this center pocket. And if you are using a directional fabric like I am, because you'll see some of these are flipped around, but most of them are coming in this direction, you want to make sure that this is the side that will go on the front of your pocket. Because if you did it this way, they're all going to look upside down on your apron, which is not ideal. So this should be 20 inches wide, just about, not quite perfect, but perfect enough. And I'm just going to draw a line at the 10-inch mark with my heat erasable pen. And look at that. That's going to be really easy to see where to sew. And the second I put the iron on it, any heat on it, it is just going to disappear like magic. So that is our first line. Now I'm going to start layering this together. So I'm going to put the apron down. And now I'm going to line this up on the bottom. Now I'm going to put the bottom pocket on and make sure you're putting all the raw edges at the bottom. So these are the 2 pockets. This one's going to have 3 pockets. So we're going to put a line 3 inches to either side of this center line. This is a chalk marker from Clover. Let's put it 3 inches from that center line and then 3 inches to the other side as well. So I'm lining up on that line and also lining up along the top edge of my pocket to make sure this line is going to go nice and straight. We're going to start by sewing one of the two lines on the small pocket to the bigger pocket. And it doesn't matter which one you start with. I do usually start on the raw edges. So if you have any issue with your knot not being great, it's not going to be at the top of a pocket where you might see it. And then I am going to double back when I get to that fold just to reinforce the top of the pocket. So let's just get one of those sewn. Now I'm going to get my apron front and I'm going to line up the raw edges on the bottom and the sides of both pockets and my apron. See that? Now the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to flip this bottom pocket section. I'm going to fold that back so that we can see the line on the larger section, and we're going to sew that to the apron. We can't just flip this back and sew here, or else you're going to have a really weird sewn section in this big pocket. So we're going to do a little bit more flipping. We're just going to lift the pockets, flip the apron fabric. So I've folded that back. So now when I sew this second line, I'm only sewing through both of those pockets. So just make sure everything's lined up, and we're going to do this third stitch line. Now our pockets are sewn on. And I ironed it to get rid of the lines, got rid of the chalk marks. I trimmed a little bit on the edge to make sure everything was evened up. Now we are going to attach the apron front and pockets to the back. So we're going to leave this face up, put the back face down, or right sides together. If you want to have just squared corners, you're just going to pin and sew this together now. But I want to show you how to make the cute little curved corners. I'm going to use just a small Pyrex cup. I think that's like a 1 cup size. You can use a coffee mug. You could use a bowl, but I like the size of this, and I happen to have it in my sewing room. So I'm just going to put this on the 2 bottom corners and draw with my pen. I'm going to clip all these layers together so that they will be less likely to move about as I cut those corners. I'm going to put some marks just at the top so that when I'm sewing, I remember to leave that section open for turning right side out. One thing I love about this project is because we are using a waistband and we're not just using this top edge, we're not going to have to be as detail oriented when we turn and press that top, because that opening is going to be hidden. That's why you want to do it at the top and not on the side or the bottom. And then I'm going to hold my hand here to try and keep it from shifting too much. And then just cut that corner. Now I'm going to do the second one. Now you're going to take it to the sewing machine. You're going to sew all the way around, leaving this open for turning. And I'm going to use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance just because there are so many layers that if you use a 1/4 inch, it might just be a little bit too small and something might not catch very well. So I found that going a little bit bigger than that is better for this project. You could even do a 1/2 inch if you want to be extra sure. Now that we've sewn all around that, we just need to clip the curves and also the corners. Because there is so much fabric here, I mean, look at that. I'm going to first trim this closer to the curve. So there's just less bulk sitting in there when it's turned. And then I'm going to do a bunch of little cuts. Now, normally I like to use pinking shears for this. But I tried that on the last one, and I'll show you in a second. It doesn't work super well. Just make sure when you're doing this, especially if you use big scissors like this, don't cut your stitch line. Let me show you what happens if you want to try pinking shears. If you try and go more than like 2 or 3 teeth from the back, it bends. So it can be done. You just have to go a lot slower. Next step, we are going to turn it right side out. And then I just stick my hand in here and get these curves smoothed out nicely. So now I'm just going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to press it, and you'll see it naturally just wants to lay like that, because these 3 pieces with all that interfacing are a lot thicker than this one back piece. So you do want to make sure when you're pressing that you get that folded over, because you just want the bottom of your pocket and not part of the back of your apron showing. Now that I have this nicely pressed, I'm going to edge stitch all the way around the entire apron, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And I've decided to use black thread on the top and a tan bobbin so it won't show as much on the back of the apron. Now that we have this all sewn together, we just need to do the sashes and the waistband. So I brought out my Skinny Mini mannequin to show you how to measure either whoever your apron is going to be for or for yourself so that you can make it super cute and have the sashes wrap around and tie in the front because you might need bigger than the basic with the fabric. I do, so don't feel bad if you do. So we're going to pretend this apron is too big for her. We're going to pretend that it is this wide, okay? And she's going to have, stop tipping. She's going to have it sit right about here on her hips. So what you're going to do is you're going to measure from here all the way around to the center. Okay, so I'm going to grab my tape measure and I'm going to put it right on the hip where the apron ended on the one side. I'm going to wrap it straight around and then I'm just going to stop kind of in the center because that is where we're going to want to tie. So I'm going to take that measurement, 27, oh, she is skinny, 27, and then I'm going to add 10 to 12 inches, depending on how much longer you want your sash to be. For the sashes, you're just going to take these long pieces or the pieces that you piece together, 4 inches by whatever you need. You're going to fold it in half, and then you're just going to sew one short end and all the way down the long end. I never pin this, I just make sure it's lining up as I'm putting it through the sewing machine. But if you're a newer sewer, teaching somebody to sew or just prefer it, you can pin it that whole length. So you're going to do both of those, and then we're going to turn those right side out. Now I want to show you one of my favorite things when you're doing long straps or sashes or whatever, bag things for bags, basically long tubes that you need to turn right side out. Now growing up, when my mom was teaching me to sew, we would put a safety pin on the end and then scrunch it. And I'm telling you, it is so hard on your hands to do that. So I want to show you how to use these fabric tubes from Dritz if you haven't used them before. It has a nice plastic tube that's slippery. That's important. And then it has like a dowel rod or kind of looks like a chopstick. So what we're going to do, and we're going to do this for both of our sashes, I have it sewn together. We're sewed across and down, left one end open. I'm going to clip the corner, just cut that off so that we can get that turned well. And then, it's the fun part. I'm just going to put the tube into the fabric and just push it all the way down. Okay, see, that's pretty long, but you're going to be amazed at how fast we can turn this. All right, next you're going to take the stick and you're going to insert it, just kind of push the fabric in the end gently. Don't do it too hard because if you really jam it hard, you could pop through your stitches or your fabric, which would be a bummer, but fixable. Anything's fixable in sewing, except messed up cutting. So you're just going to push that in. And then you're just going to pull that fabric down until you can see the tube and the stick. So now all you're going to do is you're just going to pull it like that. Ah, look at how fast that was. Oh my gosh, just pull that off. Now don't take the stick out yet because what you want to do is you want to take the stick and gently push out those corners and then you're good to go. Now all you have to do is go to the ironing board and pull that seam out and make it nice and straight and flat. I wish there was a tool that did that as quickly as this turns this thing, but you know what? This saves a ton of time over turning this right side out with a safety pin, so I'm gonna take it. Now I'm gonna show you how I figure out the perfect width for the waistband. I mean, if everything went perfectly, you would turn a 1/4 inch on each end and it would be the same width as your apron. But as we saw in the beginning, my apron was slightly off. So I just like to do it this way. I line my apron up with my waistband and then I just fold it so that it matches and I press each end. This way, You're going to have your waistband be the exact width that you want it the first time without having to adjust it later if your apron is slightly larger or skinnier than you thought it was going to be in the beginning. So see? Perfection. So now I can put that aside. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do each of these long edges. I'm going to press them under a 1/4 inch. Then the final step before we sew this on is to fold it in half. Moving right along, it is time to connect the sashes to the apron and then put on the waistband. So each sash, you're going to put the raw edges like this, about 1 inch in from the edge, and have the sashes going off the side. And now, just like we used the top of the apron to determine the length of the waistband, we are going to use the folded waistband to determine the tuck that we're going to put into the waistband. So you see, well, let's actually put it right on there so we can see how it is folded over. And you'll see the waistband is slightly bigger. We don't want it sticking out. So what I do is I just take a really small tuck like that in the sash, make sure it's going to be well inside that waistband. And I overlap about 1 inch. And then I'm just going to put a little pin in that. And then I'm going to sew a rectangle to get that nice and secure. I'm going to tuck this side the same way. Now our last step is to attach the waistband, and it's just going to fold right over the top edge of your apron, and it's going to conceal the edge of your sashes and make it all look beautiful. Now, if you want to include a tag, you could put it in the back. So I'm going to get this lined up so the fold is on the top edge and these ends are lined up correctly. And then I'm just going to flip this back. I'm going to put my tag there. Do you put tags on things? Lots of people get them made with their names, or there's so many funny tags you can get now. Let me know in the comments if you're a tagger, not a tagger. So I pinned that where it needs to be, but because I'm going to be sewing from the front, I'm going to just pin again in the same spot to make sure that I catch that tag. And then I'm going to take the pin out of the back because that's going to be easier to take out as I sew. So once you get this all lined up, you just need to pin across this edge. And then we are going to sew all 4 of the sides. This 5-pocket apron is ready to roll. Who's ready for the holidays, for hostess gifts? Who is ready for a glass of wine? I got my hair up. I am ready to work. Let's make some wine bags. In today's episode, I'm going to show you a simple way to make reversible wine bags so you can have either side out. No circles. We're going to do box bottoms. We're going to tie it with a bow, and it's going to fit either one of these size wine bottles. I love that they're reversible. You can pick 2 different fabrics. You want to make sure the fabrics coordinate because you will see that inside fabric a little bit when you have it wrapped around your wine bottle. These wine bottle bags are going to have a box bottom, so no circle cutting. It's going to be nice and simple. So let's get started. You're going to need 2 pieces of fabric, 12 inches wide, 16 inches high. If you're using a directional fabric, make sure you're paying attention and that you have the direction going on the 16-inch. And then when you go to sew it together, make sure you're paying attention to which side has the top of your pattern. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to fold this in half, and then you're going to clip or pin, and we're going to sew down one long side and across the bottom. Again, making sure you're paying attention if your fabric is directional, that you leave the top open because nobody wants a wine bag where everything on the fabric is upside down. Now you're just going to press the seams open on the long end of both pieces of fabric. You don't need to go all the way down because we will be trimming off that point. And while you're at your ironing board, take it and fold down the top edge 1/2 inch. And this doesn't have to be super exact. You just want to make sure both halves are pretty consistent. And you're going to press that as well. This way we can get all of our ironing done at once.
Now we're going to make our box bottoms, and I love using this 1.5-inch wide Cute Cuts ruler because that is exactly how far from the tip that we are going to mark our sewing line. But first we need to get it all lined up. Now I've made quite a few of these wine bags, and I have created a system that makes it go quickly and evenly. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up this seam line on one of your grid lines of your cutting mat. So you have the seam line up here, and then you have the point where it seamed right there. So we have both of those on that 10-inch mark. Doesn't matter which mark, just put it on a mark. Then you're going to flatten the bottom. So see how it creates that square, and you're going to make sure that that stitch line is lining up here, the stitch line here, to that seam line there. And then also making sure that, that everything just stays straight on that line. Sometimes you need to adjust it because sometimes you'll put it down and it'll be like a little bit wider here and there. And so I have found this is the quickest and easiest way to get this done. And I am all about getting projects done quickly whenever possible. So now we're going to take our 1.5-inch ruler, or just whatever ruler you have, and you're going to measure 1.5 inches from the tip to where we're going to sew. And then I'm just going to mark this. I'm just using a regular pen because this is going to be totally inside, encapsulated, so you'll never see that pen mark again. Then I'm going to put a little pin in that. Cute little Riley Blake pin, I love it. Now I'm going to grab this without moving it. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to put that down because we already have that all lined up nicely. And we're going to mark from the other side. Now you're just going to repeat with the other half of your wine bag. Now we're just going to sew along all 4 of those lines. And this is definitely an area where you can daisy chain them, meaning you don't have to take them totally off, just sew one to the other. And if you're doing a lot of wine bags, this really does save you some time and thread. So are wine bags something you'd like to see more of? Would you like to see how to do them with a drawstring inside? A little bit more complicated? Leave me a note in the comments and let me know if that's something that's of interest. Now the next thing you're going to do is you're going to trim 1/4 inch from that line. You can use your rotary cutter, but I'm just going to do this with scissors so I don't have to keep moving my cameras all over my room. Now the next step is to get these wrong sides together. So you're going to take one and turn it right side out. It does not matter at all which one because these wine bags will be reversible. So you don't have to make any decisions yet about which side you want out. Then we're going to put one bag inside the other and we're going to match these seams. You don't really have to worry too much down here. The main thing is to get these seams matched at the top. So the seam line and the fold, and then I'm just going to put a little clip there. And then we're just lining up this top edge. Because this is reversible and because whoever wants a snarl of a knot in their thread, I'm going to be pulling up my bobbin thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my foot down, put my needle down, holding this thread, the top thread, and then I'm going to pick the needle up and I'm going to give it a little tug and I'm going to grab that bobbin thread. So now I'm holding on to both the top and the bobbin. And I'm going to put it under that foot, and I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to do a little knot. Now we're going to stitch all the way around, and I usually hold on to that thread until I've taken maybe 2 stitches, just to make sure it doesn't get sucked back down under by some gremlin in the sewing machine. And now I'm just going to top stitch all the way around. And now that your wine bag is done, you just have to decide which side you want to be on the outside. So let's just flip this. Put the red on the outside. I think that's just going to be beautiful for fall, for a fall hostess gift, for Thanksgiving. Put that wine in there, and then I just cut a piece of 1-inch ribbon. You can use anything. I'm just going to tie it right there. And now it is ready to go.
This one is for the dogs. I am really excited. I have had this on my mind for months. Finally got around to it. This is a dog bandana with a scrunchy back. So it has elastic, and all you do is you stretch it and you put it over the dog's head. It doesn't have to go over a collar. You don't have to tie it. And if you do it right, it's not going to be tight at all, but it's going to stay on and be super cute. So I went over and chatted with my friend Riley, this cute little Wheaten Terrier. He barely wanted to sit still for a photo, so I didn't even try and get a video with him. But he did test that my measurements and everything work well, and he looked super, super cute. You have to agree, right? So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these scrunchy bandanas in 4 different sizes. I am also going to tell you how to adjust them to be the perfect size for your dog's neck. I'm going to show you how to make a basic one. This one, it's the same on the front and the back, and it was made out of a square of fabric. And I'm also going to show you how to make them reversible. Let me know in the comments what combo you would do if you do these reversible, and also which one you think you would prefer to do, just from a square or the reversible, so that you can have more variety from one bandana. All right, let's get started. Just like scrunchies that you wear in your hair, this has elastic inside gathered material. It has to be gathered so that when you stretch the elastic, your fabric can stretch. So it'll only stretch as far as your fabric goes. So our fabric over top of that has to be longer. I'm going to show you how to make them out of 1 square of fabric and 1 rectangle of fabric and 1 piece of elastic. That's what this one looks like. So it's the same on both sides, and that is a bit quicker. Or I'm going to show you how to do them so that they are double-sided. So this one, I centered the covered bridge, and it has the covered bridge on the scrunchie, so that's what you would see on the outside. Or you can flip it and have the leaves. So then you have fashion options for the dog. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of how to center and fussy cut something, but I do have a written pattern that you can get in my Etsy shop, and the link will be below this video. And that has all the details to use directional fabric to do the 1-sided, the 2-sided, and it shows you everything you need for 4 different sizes of these bandanas. In the written pattern, you can also find templates for all 4 sizes. Then the other things, I highly recommend a hot ruler. Super helpful. I'm going to show you how I use that when we do some pressing. You don't need it, but I'm finding more and more uses for this every day. Then a piece of elastic. For this one, we're going to be doing this medium size that starts from a 10-inch square of fabric. We're going to use a 9-inch piece of elastic, rotary cutter. I'm going to use my quilter's clapper, safety pin for turning some things and putting the elastic in, and the sewing machine, obviously. Those are the basic things that we need. Now, before we get started, I want to talk about this template. So I don't remember where I heard this. It might have been somebody in a comment a while ago, but I bought these flexible cutting mats. It's just thin plastic at the Dollar Tree a while ago, and I have yet to use them. So we are going to break these in today. They basically said, if you're going to be using a template a bit, make it out of the plastic so that it's not going to get worn out. That's assuming you don't need to pin it to your fabric, which we won't. So we are going to make a template for this medium dog bandana out of this plastic. This is also going to be helpful if you wanted to fussy cut, because you're going to be able to see through it where you can't see through the paper to see what's underneath there. Lining the top edge of the plastic up with the top edge of the template. Then I'm just going to take a ruler. I'm going to go a little bit below the point, hold that down. And then I'm taking an old rotary blade. Don't freak out. This is not new. This isn't what I've been using for fabric. This is an older, duller one. So I'm going to use it on the plastic. It will probably be the last time it's used. So I cut through there. I'll keep that for a future pattern. And then I'm just going to keep lining this up and cut on these lines so that I have this template shape out of the plastic. And then you can either use it, like make yourself a sticker to put on there, or use a Sharpie to write what it is. All right, so now I have a plastic template that I can use over and over again for this medium-sized dog bandana. So this template is going to make our medium bandana, which is this one. It folds over a little bit with the scrunchie side, but this is the size that we are going to be making. And if you don't have the templates, it's totally fine. I'm going to show you how to make it out of squares and how to do this side cutting on your own. So I'm going to start by showing you the basic bandana, where it's going to be the same fabric on both sides of the bandana and the scrunchie band. So we just need 2 pieces of fabric, a 10-inch square, and then a 12 by 3 to make our scrunchie cover. So what you're going to do with the squares, you're going to turn it and you're going to fold it in half, right sides together, matching these points. And then I just finger press that. Then if you have the templates from the pattern that you can get on Etsy, you can just put that down and you can cut these based on the template. But if you don't, I'm going to show you how to do that. So you're going to line it up on your mat and you're going to put these top points on a line. This should be on a line too, if everything's nice and squared off. Then you're going to take a ruler and you're going to measure 2 inches in from that point, and you're going to trim. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. If you've watched my video about how to make an over-the-collar bandana, this is going to look really familiar because it's the same process, but for this one, we're going to be adding the elastic. So you're not going to have to put it over top of a collar. You don't have to worry about it. You just get it over the dog's head and it is good to go. So now that we have trimmed these sides, I put it on my ironing surface. This is a portable ironing board. If you want to make your own, I'm going to put a link in the video description to show you where to find that video tutorial. It's quite easy. We're going to open this up and we're going to put it face down because now we are going to fold a 1/4 inch in on both of these sides. And that is where the hot ruler comes in. So I love this. It's flexible, feels kind of fuzzy, and you can iron right on it. So it's a great way to just really get accurate folds, and it can go up to 4 inches. The fuzziness helps it hold the fabric. So when you're folding it over and testing it and ironing it, kind of holds it in place. So I've just positioned this, I'm folding it over so that I can see that it's on that 1/4 inch line. And I'm going to take my iron and just go right over the fabric and the hot ruler. And I'm going to come back with my quilter's clapper. That's going to absorb some of the heat and set that seam. Now, because you have this ruler, there is some thickness, so it's not as tight of a fold as it could be. So I usually just come back and press it one more time. Hit it with my clapper. If you're not familiar with a clapper, this is an unfinished piece of hardwood. It's usually oak or maple. I'm not sure which one this is, but they're usually cut so that it's really comfortable to hold. And like I said, it absorbs the heat and sets that pressed edge. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to do this side. These do come in different lengths. If you're going to invest in one, I would get the 14 inch because if you decide you like them, you're going to be using them for some longer things, and it's easier to have the longest one you can get. So you don't have to move it as many times when you're pressing longer pieces than this. Now we are going to put it right side up again. We're going to fold it back the way it was. You don't need to press that. Kind of finger press it if you want to. Then I'm going to grab some clips. I'm going to clip this in place, and then we're just going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam down the bottom. I call it the bottom. So the 2 sides of the point of the bandana. Now here's another tip. If you are newer or teaching kids to sew or just find it a little more tricky to figure out exactly where to stop for that 1/4 inch, you can take a ruler and mark the 1/4 inch line here. So this is just a heat erasable pen. You could use a pencil, but sometimes I'll just draw that line. It's because that makes it super easy. I just sew and I know to stop there instead of having to look at my foot. So that's a great tip for beginners or if you just want to be moving really fast. Now the other thing I'll get ready before I go to the sewing machine is the scrunchie holder. We're just going to fold it in half. If you want to press it, you can, just so it stays down better. And we're going to sew a 1/4 inch on this raw edge. Put 2 little clips to hold that. So that's the second thing we're going to sew. Because I'm starting off the edge of the fabric, I'm going to use a leader fabric, which is just a scrap piece of fabric. And I'm going to start sewing on there so that I don't have to pull up the bobbin thread, and I'm going to make sure there are no knots on my actual project. So I'll just start sewing like this. And then once I get onto my project, you just have to remember to go backwards a little bit to secure those threads. Then I'm at that line, so I'm just going to turn. And you want to make sure these are staying folded in the direction that we press them as we get to those, because we will catch them right at the end. So you want to make sure that doesn't get turned up if it hits your needle plate like that. And then I'm going to use my scissors to hold it down so I don't accidentally sew my finger. Then I'm just going to go daisy chain right into my fabric scrunchie where I have to sew down the one side. Trim those apart. And then I'm going to cut this corner or trim it. And I like to do it in 2 longer cuts instead of 1 straight across. And that makes it so there's less fabric that needs to be in that point when we turn it right side out. The first thing we need to do is turn both of these right side out. So to turn the tube, I can't use a tube turner because both ends are open. So I'm just going to take a safety pin and put it in there from the outside. Then push it in and just work that so that it goes right side out. Once you get it started, it's pretty easy. It's not very long. Pull those ends out, and then we are going to press with the seam on one side. So just kind of roll it to make sure that none of that fabric is tucked in, and we're going to have a nice even strip of fabric to put our elastic into. Just give that a little press. Now this is a little bit harder to turn in right side out. We have to go through one of these holes. Actually, it's not super hard. The 8-inch, using an 8-inch square, that one's a little trickier because it's only about 1.5 inches open there. This one's not too bad. You turn it right side out, but keep the edges that we folded under. Get that point out. And now we need to press this, making sure that that seam is right on the edge and that the fabric is all rolled out. It's not folded under. Make sure this that we pressed stays inside and we don't press it weird. So now you have a decision to make about this. You can leave it like this and we can attach the elastic and it will look like this one. So we don't have any stitching here. We just attach this scrunchy part. On this one, I did do some extra sewing. So I top stitched around here and I top stitched across the top, even though it was just a square. And that's really just to hold it in place. It's a little bit more decorative. You don't have to do it because if you wash this, you're just going to repress it the way that we just did. So if you're making a lot, I would recommend skipping that step because, again, just another step that takes a little bit of time, unless you want that to be part of the decorativeness of the bandana. So now we need to put the elastic into the casing. So our elastic is 9 inches. This is 12. It could have been longer. I could have done 15 and made it a little bit more scrunchy looking, but this is what I did. Now I'm going to use the safety pin again. I'm going to feed the elastic in there until the end of the elastic is at the end of the fabric. We don't want to put it all the way through because we need to tack this end. Okay, there we go. So I have this end of the elastic lined up with this edge. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew forward, back, and then another line forward, back to attach that. Then I'm going to pull this the rest of the way through and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So let's head to the sewing machine. Well, it's a good thing I'm doing two because I forgot to hit record. So we have the elastic right at the edge. And now I'm going to sew forward and back twice to secure the fabric and the elastic. And nobody's going to see that. It's going to be inside the bandana. Just keep it within 1/2 inch of that edge. So now our pin is still in there, so we're going to pull that out. We're going to pull the fabric down. We're going to do the same thing to the other end. So you want to make sure you haven't twisted the elastic. Keep it nice and flat. Keep this part flat. Keep the ruffled, gathered part over here. And then we're just going to sew and attach. So they're both the same. This one is for the basic. It's the folded over, same on both sides. And this one is for the reversible, where it's a different fabric on each side. Same length, same way to make them. So now we just need to put them into the bandanas. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this into this opening 3/4 inch in. Take a ruler and see. So that's not quite. We're going to put it in a little bit more. But the way I have it measured and for the end sizes, it is assuming you're putting it in 3/4 inch on each side. So then I like to start on the outside of the bandana, and I'm going to pull up the bobbin thread. I'm going to start down so that we sew that whole part closed. So I'm going to put my foot down, my needle down, holding that thread, pull the needle up, give a little tug to get that bobbin thread up. I'm going to take tweezers, put them both under the foot, hold them while I go forward and back a few stitches. And doing this avoids any knot on the back. And now we're just going to sew a rectangle and the diagonals through the rectangle over top of these elastics. You want to make sure you do it before that 3/4 inch so that both of these edges are on the elastic. And then I'm going to go diagonal, corner to corner, just to make sure we're getting that nice and secure. So I'm just going to go over that top line again. So now it is attached on one side, and we're just going to fold it over. So basically wrap it around and do the same thing over here. And make sure you keep this straight and don't let it pull at a weird angle when you're sewing it down. And there it is, all done. That is our basic. And then you can just spread this fabric out a little bit. All right, so to do the reversible, you basically need the same shape as that 10-inch square with the edges cut off, but you need it to come from 2 pieces of fabric, one for the front and one for the back. So this is where I think the template really comes in handy, because then you're going to get that cut nice and easy. You do have to be careful that you're past that template when you're using your rotary cutter, because it will slice through it and change the shape if you're not paying close attention. I think it's going to be faster also to use a rotating cutting mat. You can make your own template out of fabric. If you started with the 10-inch square, cut those edges off, and then just cut it in half. That would be the same size as this template. Okay, so we have front and back, and then we also have these strips. So these are cut 1 3/4 inches by 12 inches, so that when we sew them together, it's going to be equivalent to having a 3-inch piece folded in half and sewn together. All right, so I'm just going to put those right sides together, put a few clips on there, because we're going to be sewing down both of the long sides with a 1/4 inch seam to make the casing for the elastic. And this will become the scrunchy part, basically. All right, now we need the iron and our hot ruler again. So just like with the square, we're going to iron these edges over a 1/4 inch. Now doing the reversible takes a little bit more ironing when you're starting, but it's a lot easier to turn right side out than working from the original square. Because the original square, as you saw, you have to pull it all through this little space here to turn it right side out. But for this, the whole top is going to be open. So you're just flipping this part, and then we're sewing across the top. So we have these done, and then we need to fold this top edge down a 1/4 inch. The reversible bandanas will be about a 1/2 inch shorter than the square ones, because the square one does not have this seam allowance up at the top. But I don't think you or any dog is really going to notice that slight discrepancy in size. All right, so now we're going to press the same 3 edges on the second fabric. I'm going to try it from the bottom and see if that is easier to do. Don't know that it really matters. If you're pulling up or pulling down, that's going to be personal preference. If you have one of these and try, let me know which way you usually do it. Do you pull your fabric up and over like I'm doing now, or do you do it from the top down like I did the last one? I'm curious. Sometimes just to get that super pressed, I turn it with the right side up and just go over it one more time. Make sure that all stays put where we want it. Now we're going to put these right sides together, lining these up, and that should line up the top as well. I'm just going to clip that top just so it stays in place while we're sewing the bottom. And I make a little mark, just makes it easier. And then clip here. And just like with the basic that we made out of a square, we're going to sew down here to here. And then we're going to clip that bottom, turn it right side out, and press. All right, so off to the sewing machine to sew the bandana and the scrunchie fabric. Now we're going to sew together the reversible one, and just like with the last one, I'm going to use this leader fabric. I should have done this first since I have to do 2 sides. I could have done one side, daisy chain to the bandana, and then the other side, but next time. You can do it that way to begin with. And then just like with the other one, I'm going to clip the fabric at the point so that we're going to get that to fold better than if we had left all that bulk in there. And now back to the ironing board. All right, so for the reversible one, it's very similar to what we did for the basic bandana. I'm gonna grab my safety pin. We're going to turn this fabric tube for the scrunchie part right side out. And because this is reversible, I did the reversible fabric on here as well. So when we're pressing it, we need to worry about getting those seams flattened out on both sides. The other one, we just had to worry about one side and the other side just was a fold. So I usually get it started and press and then keep going. Sometimes it just rolls back on itself if you try and do the whole length at the same time. Now for this one, it's way easier to turn right side out because the whole top is open. So you're just pushing that point out. You can use a turning tool or just do it as best you can with your fingers. And then you're, again, pushing that seam out. We're going to press along the bottom. So now this is why we had already pressed this so that it's going to be ready to go. We're just going to make sure that that top edge lines up. You go over it one more time. And we're going to clip that, making sure that these folded edges are lined up. In this one, you obviously have to sew across there or the bandana is just going to fall apart. So you can decide to only sew across the top to close it, or if you want it to be more consistent, you can sew across the top and then also down here. Just do not sew the sides closed, because that is where we are going to be adding the scrunchie elastic. And now we just need to get our elastic in here, just like we did with the other one. And this is a 3/4 inch piece of elastic that I am using. It is pretty tight if you're doing the small 8 inch, this tiny one, because this is a little bit smaller, so it's pretty much the same size, but it will work. So I would recommend either 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch. Okay, so I'm just getting that so that they're lined up. Sometimes I'll just put a clip on there and make sure that elastic doesn't sneak in there. But if it does, I just grab my tweezers that I keep at the sewing machine and pull it back because we want those even. Okay, so now the sewing machine, we're going to sew this, attach that, and then we're going to pull it through and attach the elastic on the other side. We need to sew across the top to sew these two pieces together. I can start with the leader fabric again. And I sew about 1/8 inch from the edge because we only folded it over 1/4 inch. So if we do a 1/4 inch seam, we're not necessarily going to be getting everything that was folded under. And then you can decide if you want to sew down here and up here. It's pretty much a look. Would be consistent with that, but this part you're not going to see as much because it will be around the dog's neck. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to leave it as is. Then you're just going to add the scrunchie elastic just like we did on the first one, making sure that the fabrics match. So you don't want to do it this way with the green up. If you want this to be reversible and look like it coordinates, you want to have the fabric of the scrunchie matching this when you put it in and sew that together. Now, when you're doing these, you want the resting size of the elastic and the bandana to be 1 to 2 inches larger than your dog's neck. So if you're making this for a dog that you know, just measure their neck, not tight, just kind of loosely around, and then make it 1 inch or 2 bigger. And if you need to, you can change the size of the elastic based on the size of your bandana. So you might make your bandana first and then figure out how much you need to add, always remembering that you need to put the elastic about 3/4 inch inside, so account for that when you're doing your math, and you can make it perfect for your puppy. And then, just like with the other one, you're just gonna wrap it around, make sure you're not twisting it, and put it in and sew the other side. So what do you think? Are you going to give these a try? I think this would be a fantastic thing to sew and sell as well. Why not do a twofer? Do a scrunchie dog bandana and a scrunchie for the owner, and they can match. They can just look so cute out on their walks with the person with the matching scrunchie to the dog bandana. I think that people will love that for a gift, for themselves. Could be a little upsell for you. Just go with that scrunchie theme. So let me know what you think of that. If you give it a try, let me know how it goes. And make sure you have subscribed to my channel. Click the notification bell so that YouTube lets you know when I post new tutorials, and happy sewing. Today's video is going to the dogs, dog bandanas in particular that fit right over their collar. We are going to make these out of simple squares of fabric. This is one of my most viewed videos on YouTube, but I've gotten a little feedback that it moves a little too quickly. So today I'm going to talk you through it, and I'm going to show you and explain the different size squares that you need for small, medium, or large dog collars. I took the small collar out of the one that I had already made and showed you just so you can have a visual of the three sizes. And we're mostly looking at the widths, not the color, nothing else. So let's talk about the squares that we need for each of these. We will start with the small, which is this one. You're going to start with an 8-inch square. So that's pretty easy to find out of scrap fabric. Then you're going to turn it on its side so it's a diamond. And I like to line it up on my grid just to make sure that I have everything straight. So these 2 points will become this bottom point of the bandana, and these two are going to be folded, cut, and sewn to make the channel for the collar. So for the 8-inch square, we are going to fold the sides in 1 3/4 inches. So what I like to do is take my handy dandy heat erasable pen and take a ruler. And the reason I get my square lined up on this grid is so that if I line my ruler up on the grid, I know I will be drawing straight on the corners of this fabric. So I have it lined up to 1 3/4. I'm going to draw a line. And I know that's dark, but it doesn't matter because once we hit it with an iron, it will disappear. We're going to do this on both sides. So we have the first one marked. We're going to be folding that under. Now let's take the second one. The medium size, you need a 10 by 10 fabric, which is perfect because if you like buying these stackers, I mean, look at how many bandanas we could make out of this stacker of all 10. So I'm going to do this one, these little flowers, but I do want to show you one thing to consider if you are using stackers. This is directional this way, but when we turn it this way and fold it and it becomes the bandana, it just doesn't look good because everything's sideways. It's not going this way. So don't use a directional fabric if it's already pre-cut into a stacker. Now, if you want to use the directional fabric, you can always cut it, but just make sure you cut it so that the direction is going this way. Hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, that's going to save me some time. I don't have to cut the 10-inch. I just have to line it up on my grid. And then for this one, we are going to fold the sides in 2 inches. So I'm just going to put my ruler 2 inches in, draw my line. And this one has to go in a little bit more because this collar is wider than this one. So we're going to be needing a wider channel. So we have the small one marked, the medium one marked. And now we need the large one. So the large dog bandana needs a 12 by 12 square. That's for this one. And again, we're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to line it up on my mat. And this one we're going to fold in 2.5 inches. The side we're going to mark, line it up on a grid so that it's easier to just double check 1, 2.5, because you're using your ruler, and I'm also using the grid to make sure I'm drawing these lines in the correct place. Okay, large, medium, small. Let's grab the iron. So we're going to iron and fold on all of these lines that we just drew, and the lines are going to disappear when the heat hits them. So you want to make sure that you fold that over and kind of finger press it right on that line. Because once we hit it with heat, the line will be no more and you will not know where it was. Of course, you can always remeasure, being a little more dramatic than I need to be. Just do that. And then if you have a quilter's clapper or tailor's clapper and you want to use it, you're just going to iron and then just press that down. It absorbs the heat. It absorbs any steam if you're using steam in your iron. And my favorite part is it makes the fabric not so hot, so you're not burning your fingers. So we're going to do this fold on all 3 of these bandanas. Triangles are folded in for all 3 sizes to make the channel on our dog bandana. So I'm going to move the ironing board for a minute and we are going to trim again. Now this is where sometimes people think I do it a little weird, but I'm going to give you the reason why. I like to make the marks from the points and press it in once first before trimming, because what we're going to do is we're going to fold this and fold this to this line so that we can sew just like this. So you'll see that's folded and folded so we have no raw edges. You can be more exact if you already have that crease set. I'm going to line that crease up on a grid line so that it's easy to see where that 1/2 inch actually is. So fold on the crease line, open it up. You might notice I have quite a few sizes of rulers, and it isn't necessary. If you're a beginning sewer, you can get 1 ruler and you will be good to go. If you do that, let's see, if you're just starting out, I would get a ruler like this. This is 24.5 inches, something big that will be straight all the way across fabric if you buy it by the yard, because you can always work with that with anything, but I'm going to show you here. So just when you're doing smaller things, it's a little bit more, oh, my fabric moved. It's a little bit more cumbersome to move around when you're cutting smaller pieces. That's why I'll usually grab a smaller ruler, but this works just fine. You can always add more ruler sizes as you continue with your craft, or not, totally up to you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold that into the crease, and I'm going to finger press it, which basically means just press down with your fingers to kind of get it to stay. And then I'm going to fold it again to where we had ironed that fold. Adjust if necessary, then press that. So that is creating the channel, this part, for our dog bandana. So I'm going to do that on each side of each bandana. And if you want to put a pin or clip on there, you can. Usually don't bother with that. We're going to be sewing the part we just folded down so that it's not going to pop up as you put your collar through the channel. And since we're going to be sewing from the back side of the fabric, and you don't want a big old bird's nest knot here by mistake, I'm going to show you how to pull up the bobbin thread. It's one of my favorite tricks, so you might have seen this before. You're going to hold the top thread, and then you're going to put the foot down, put the needle down, lift the needle back up, and give it a little tug. That gets the bobbin thread up to the top, so you can be holding both. Then you're going to put them under the foot. Now let me try and do it this way. And then my machine does have an automatic knotter, so I'm just going to do a knot. And I'm holding these 2 strings tight while I do that so that they can't get sucked back down and create that bird's nest. Now, if your machine doesn't knot on its own, you're going to go forward 2 or 3 stitches and then backward 2 or 3 stitches. Now I'm just going to do this for the rest of those pieces that we folded on all 3. Now, because I'm doing a few, I can chain stitch them just like you would for quilt blocks if you're a quilter at all, which basically means I'm not going to lift it and then have to pull the bobbin thread up every time. I'm just going to feed my second dog bandana along, and then I'll just cut them apart at the end. That can be a real time and thread saver. So if you've never done this before, this is what it's going to look like. You basically have a very small amount of thread right here in between. I'm just going to snip that, leave this one on, and then I'm just going to turn this around and do the other side of all 3. Back to the ironing board. We have all of the channels stitched. So now what we need to do is we need to fold them right sides together, match the points, and match the ends of the channels. And we're just going to press this top edge real quickly on all 3. And the next thing is we're going to sew here to here. So I am just going to put a couple little clips just to make sure the fabric stays lined up. You can use pins as well, but to me this is the perfect kind of project to use clips because it doesn't have to be super, super precise, and the clips are going to hold it together just fine. So even though I'm doing 3 because I'm showing you the 3 different sizes, this does give you an idea of efficiencies that you can use if you're making more than one of any specific project. If you group what you're doing, like do all of this pressing, do all of this sewing, do all of this, for all the ones that you're doing, you're going to be saving time. You can also do that chain stitching like I showed you, save some thread, save some time not pulling bobbin threads up 6 times. You just did it once. All right, back to the sewing machine. Now we're just going to be sewing down this side and up this side, basically from channel to channel with a 1/4 inch seam. And we're going to come down to this point and we're going to pivot. Now I just want to give you a little tip. If you're new to sewing or you're teaching kids to sew, this can be really helpful. You can take a ruler, because we're going to be turning down here, right? And so you can take a ruler and make a little mark, a 1/4 inch from that edge. And then you can do the same thing on this side. And then you or they won't have to pay as much attention to where you are based on the foot or the markings on your sewing machine. You can just go to that point, pivot, and move. And it's going to be a really big confidence booster for beginning sewists. Even though my machine does have the automatic knot, I'm going to go back and forth on both ends because we're going to have to turn this through this pretty small channel, especially on this small one. And it's going to put a little bit of strain on that seam. So I like to reinforce it by going back and forth. So you'll notice my needle is at that mark, or almost, let's see. Yeah, it's like a hair before it. Now it's a hair after. And these markings on my 1/4 inch foot are at the edge of the fabric. So that, if I don't mark it, that is how I know that it's time to lift my presser foot and pivot to do a 1/4 inch on the opposite side. And just like with the last one, we can chain piece these. So I just overlap it where I can, make sure this is going to be lined up with the edge of my 1/4 inch foot, and just move forward. We're in the home stretch. The next thing we need to do is we need to clip our corners. You can either clip it straight across like that, but keep it a little away from the stitching. You do not want to cut the stitching. Or, and I prefer this way, especially with a point like that, is you can come in and take a little bit more off on each side. Because then there's less fabric that has to go in here, and it's going to turn to make a better point. And you can just do it from the beginning. You don't have to go straight across first. I just wanted to show you the 2 ways to go. Now you'll see I didn't get right on that line, but it's fine. For a project like this, no one's going to know that it should have been a little bit over. Now, if this was a quilt block, that would have been a problem, but it's not, so we are good to go. Next step, we're going to turn these right side out through the channel. So you need to get the 2 channels turned out, and then we also need to get this point. And I always do it with my finger first, but that's not a very good point, is it? So I'm going to use this turning tool, which is designed to help get these points out. It's not too pointy. You still want to be careful. You could also use a chopstick or something else that isn't going to mark your fabric. But no matter what you use, make sure you are gentle as you massage that point, because if you go too hard, you could end up with this popping through, and then there will be sadness. Now we are going to iron this, and I'm going to make sure that that seam is on the edge so that it's nice and even on both sides. Now we're going to do the other 2. And when I'm getting these seams straight, I just kind of roll it a little bit to massage it to where I want it to be. And for these bigger ones, I'll do one side at a time because it's harder to get both of these sides to stay. So all 3 of these are pressed. You could just put the collar through without sewing the channel line. So you could leave it like that versus this, so you wouldn't have a stitch line, but you can also make the stitch line match the fabric so it won't really show. But I feel like doing this extra step keeps the bandana in place a little bit better. So I always do it, but it's totally up to you. If you like this look without another stitch line on there, try it and see how you like it. You can always come back and add it later if you decide that you're like me and you're like, yeah, you know what, she was right. I want to put that in there. So what we're going to do is grab our pen again, and I'm just going to draw a line that is parallel to this top fold and just about at the end of our channel. The main thing to do is you want to make sure there's enough space for this hook to go through. So even if we moved it up a little bit, it would be getting a bit tight because this has a little thickness to it too. So that is why we made these channels these specific sizes. Okay, 3 more lines to sew. Back to the sewing machine. So let me know how you would use these. Are you going to make seasonal bandanas for your own dogs? A lot of groomers will make quick bandanas for when they groom a dog. They send them home all fancy in a new bandana. This is also a great thing to sew and sell. This is very basic, very fast way to make them. You can put applique on them. Anyway, let me know in the comments who you're going to make these for, what size you think you'll do, and happy sewing. So what do you think? Is this going to help get some things checked off your list? I sure hope so. Happy sewing and happy holidays. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. Click that bell so YouTube notifies you whenever I post something new. My name is Tara Reed. I'm an artist, a fabric designer with Riley Blake, and I love doing these videos, especially easy sewing projects, things to sew for gifts, and also teaching people how to sew and sell.